IB Nation, Notre Dame fans, welcome back to another edition of the Irish Breakdown podcast brought to you by FanDuel, part of the Believe Network. And we are joined today by the newest member of the Believe family. That is David Pollack, a former two-time All-American at Georgia, I believe, correct? Want to make sure I put some respect on that. Three-time All-American at Georgia. I think Outland or Lombardi, right? You got the Outland, right? Got the Outland trophy.
You're 0 for 2, Lombardi.
0 for 2, Lombardi. Dang it. See, these trophies are so messed up. It's like O lineman, interior lineman with
Man,
B
don't
lineman.
nobody care about those stupid trophies anyway. I love the intro. I love the intro to the podcast. It made me think of like Dre, like next episode.
So, well, you know what's funny is I had a guy make that music for me, and he goes, well, what are you looking for? I said, I want a combination of Rush Limbaugh's intro music and Dre. And so that's what he made for me. So
I felt it. I felt it.
Yeah. So we come correct with it. But we're here to talk some Notre Dame football with David Pollack. And, it's to kick things off, David, I want to talk with you a little bit about the evolution of Notre Dame program through your eyes. And if we kind of went back and talked about things that you've observed with the Notre Dame program, back 2012, 15, 18, as they've kind of come along in the Brian Kelly era. And then you look at kind of how you've talked about them really going back to late last season. I want to get your thoughts on where you've seen this program evolve and why you went from being someone who said, I don't think they can compete with these SEC teams, to where last year in December, you're talking about like, I think this team could win it all. They were close, didn't quite get there.
Yep.
When you look at this program, David, what's changed when you look at this team? What's different on film now and in the program now from where it was, a decade ago?
Physicality, toughness, just that you can see it, man. Like it's on a different level. The strain is on a different level. Like these are, but listen, I know recruiting is picking up as well. Like recruiting is definitely on the rise too, but it's just a different. You've always had guys that were in the trenches that were pretty good, but like now I see a bunch of guys flying all over the field that play with an edge, that play with some toughness. And I think it comes from Marcus Freeman. Like, I think Marcus he's an absolute stud. I had him on our podcast not too long ago just because the human being is just hard not to love. Like, he's just such a good dude, and he's got a good heart. But he's made of all the right stuff, man. Like a defensive-minded linebacker, like just grimy, dirty. Like, that's just what we are, right? Like, that's why I love it, because that's what I played. So I just think there's a different level of toughness along with belief, along with recruiting going up, that it's just this program's in a different spot than I've seen it since I've been covering it.
It is funny when you talk about the Marcus Freeman aspect, because I've told people, I was like, you meet Marcus Freeman, you talk to him, he's a very nice guy, polite guy, smart guy, family guy, strong faith and all that. I said, but this is a former Big Ten middle linebacker, y'all. Like, this is still a guy, you get him on the football field, you see a little different side of him. And to your point, this team plays with it. I'm sure you've been on a practice field that Mike Denbrock's been on. That guy coaches with an edge too. And Al Golden was certainly that way as well. And so you see those type of things. Like, David, when I remember back the 2012 game against Alabama, and Notre Dame's got Stephon Tuitt, and you look, okay, Stephon Tuitt, he matches up with everybody else. Lewis Nix, okay, and then it stopped. I mean, just physically, you talk about how that team against that Bama team, and just physically couldn't stand, couldn't hold up against that team. And now you look at them now, the length, the talent, you do see something different. I think another thing that's changed, and I want to get your thoughts on this, is 10 years ago, I brought this up earlier this summer. When's the last time we went into a season where we're saying Notre Dame might have the best corner and running back in all of college football? Like, where this team can run with people, where they'd have a Jalen Smith and a Will Fuller, but again, it would always stop. Like, here's what I said about Bama in 2012. You take Notre Dame's 5 best players, they can hold up with Alabama's. We're talking Stephon Tuitt, Lewis Nix, Manti, Zach Martin, and Tyler Eifert. But then 8 through 30 mismatch. 6 through 30 mismatch. That's what's different now. But when you watch them against Georgia,
so I remember that against. So I was there, and I remember that against Alabama. And I remember talking to one of the Alabama offensive linemen after the game, and I'm not going to mention his name, but everybody knew who he was. He was big time. He won a bunch of awards, and I was like, man, like, y'all just took them apart. Like, what did you see when you were on film? He was like, when we watched them on tape, we saw Mississippi State. So, like, that gives you an idea of where it's at.
Yeah.
Let's put it this way. Georgia ain't saying that bull crap after last year because they physically got in that ace, right? Like, so I think it's just yes, you're absolutely right. It's the depth of it. The linemen were always, offensive linemen were always good. Like, they were always big and strong, and tight ends have always been good. Now, I think the difference last year, and the biggest thing I'm curious to see this year, the competitive spirit of Riley Leonard and the athletic ability was pretty unmatched, bro. Like, that guy, he's a dude now. Like, I'm drafting that sucker, like, first off the bus. Like, just to go, if I'm going to play any sport, he's one of my first picks just because of this, and I just believe in him. I trust him, and that was what was best about Notre Dame was the ground game. Being able to use him, short yardage, good freaking luck. Give it to him every single time, and it was going to be successful. So, the pieces are better. The secondary, and more importantly, Chris Ash coming in, because I think Al Golden, I thought Al Golden, you already mentioned the OC. I thought Al, with Al Golden paired together, I thought him and Denbrock were the best in the country a year ago. And now you lose that, which that's a big deal. Now, Chris Ash, similar path, like coached in the NFL, was an unsuccessful college coach, like has a lot of experiences, a bunch of different conferences, like been kind of all over the place. But that's a couple question marks that I'll say, though, moving forward is, do you place Riley Leonard, his competitive spirit, his toughness, and physicality, because that dude was physical and his makeup was really, really good. And then on the defensive side of the football, and here's the thing, it ain't like you got time to figure this out. Mm-hmm. Like,
right.
Your first 2 games might be the hardest games of the season, like on the whole schedule. Now, thank God you got a bye week in between them, but like, you're going to have to come out the gate and know who you are at that spot. And that quarterback spot obviously is going to be a big part in determining how good Notre Dame can be.
It is interesting looking at the supporting cast, because last year you go into the season, you got 6 returning career starts in the offensive line. You got a true freshman at left tackle. You've got a receiving core made up of sophomores and transfers. We knew that Jeremiah Love and Jadarian Price were talented, but they were unproven players. Now all those guys are back. You bring in Malachi Fields, you bring in Will Pauling, and now you say, okay, now you don't maybe need the quarterback to carry that way, but then that puts a lot of pressure on the rest of that group. And then, of course, you've got a defense that's making the adjustment. So it's interesting. It's a different dynamic around the quarterback this year. But at the end of the day, to win a championship, you need your quarterback to deal. I mean, Will Howard's not a first-round talent, but you look at him in the playoffs. I mean, it's where's the ball need to go? I'm going to get it there, and I'm going to make those big throws and get it to the playmakers.
But what was difficult to defend about Will Howard? Will Howard was difficult because Will Howard, he was experienced. He was big, he's strong. So the problem with Will Howard is he could complete those passes that would move the sticks. But third and short, goal line situations, he could also run the football, break tackles, and be a problem. So, Jeremiah Love is great. And I got a bunch of flack, by the way, for that, too, because I said it was the best running back room in America versus Penn State. Penn State fans were not happy with me, but it's the truth. He's a freak. He's elite. But Riley Leonard's legs took a lot of pressure off of him and allowed him not to have to do as much. Now, Price obviously being able to spell him, different brand too, because yards after contact, just physicality, toughness. And then Williams in the backfield, by the way, golly, like another one that just comes in, it just keeps coming and keeps getting, you don't lose anything, which is really good. But that's where I'll say you still got some question marks to answer, because who's it going to be? Is it going to be Carr? Is it going to be Minchie? Like which one is it going to be? Like and the styles are going to be dramatically different, and you can't convince me that we're not going to see both. Like I think we're going to see both. I don't know, y'all know better than I do because of practice and stuff like that, but I wouldn't be surprised if we did.
Well, I mean, look, David, if you look at Notre Dame's history, even if they don't want to have 2 quarterbacks play, they've needed it. I mean, Dane Chris gets hurt in 2011. You bench him in 2010. He gets benched in 2011. 2012, you've got Ever Golson. He gets hurt against Stanford. You need Tommy against BYU. You go through the years. Tommy gets hurt against USC in 2013. They don't have a good backup, and they can't move the ball in the second half. Unfortunately, Stephon Tuitt just lit USC up in that second half, and they couldn't score either. But you can think, hey, we just want one guy, but you're going to need, in a 16-game season, you're going to need a guy. I mean, look like Riley last year getting dinged up against Penn State. Probably should have pulled him at some point in time against Northwestern because he got injured on that first drive. But I could see that. I think the question is going to be, if Kenny doesn't win the job, do you take carries away from Jeremiah and Jadarian to get a package for him?
Or does
is he that kind of runner?
Or does that make those guys better? Because again,
potentially, right.
Just remember what you get with the quarterback run game. Like with the quarterback run game, you get another guy blocking. Like instead of the quarterback handing it off, now he's carrying the football. So now you've got an extra blocker on the field, which is a big time advantage for you. So I think that with coupled with Love, made him so dangerous. It's what helped him clear holes, especially early in the season, man. Like, it ain't like this passing attack was any good. The running game wasn't elite, but down the stretch now, Riley Love started clicking. Greathouse clicks down the stretch in the playoffs and looks like an absolute stud. And so it continued to grow and morph. I just think you don't have that luxury this year. Like, out the gates, you're going to have to be really, really good. The easiest thing to me is when you have a running quarterback, I can teach you the mechanisms, and I can teach you the plays, and I can bring you along slowly in the passing game. But I can use what you do best. I can use your feet. I can still help the offense and move it. So that's where I say it's interesting, unless cars lighten it up, which I haven't heard that. That's not what I've heard. I've heard, both sides have been doing pretty well. Like, what's the quarterback play look like? Because if it's going to be close, you get a big time advantage when you add wheels into the equation and when you don't.
Well, let me ask you a question. Let's say in this scenario, let's say CJ Carr wins a starting job, and they're going to say, look, we're going to have to have a package for Kenny Minchie, because it's one of those things. Every other position, when you're deeper than your starting lineup, you say, hey, we got to figure out a way to get that guy onto the field. As a defensive player, how do you view the quarterback run game when they're bringing a guy in to just do that? Sort of like we saw Tyler Buckner in 2021, when you kind of know, hey, this is what we're going to do. Does it change it, or is it similar to like, okay, 3rd and 1, that Riley's going to run the ball? The question is, can you stop it or not? As a defensive player, what does that mean when the guy's being brought in and you kind of know this is what they're going to do?
Well, first of all, that means you have to prepare for 2 guys, which means I have to prepare for 2 different systems, which means I have to learn a lot more and expand a lot more with what I want to do, what I want to put in, which makes me think more, which is a good thing. You want people thinking on defense. The more you make us guys think on defense, the better it ends up for you, I promise. So I think it gives that element. But here's the thing. You've got to be successful at whatever that is. Does anybody doubt Notre Dame's going to have a big physical offensive line? Like, every year, check. Like, that's going to happen. So I think now it becomes who, and Marcus is going to say this, and he said this with me. Who's the one who's not making mistakes? Like, not putting us in a bind, not putting us in a bad position. I think you feel pretty dang good about defensively, what you are, who you are. The way you were able last year to sustain injuries of your best players and just continue to mow on, like, it was incredibly impressive. And it's not like you don't have Drake in there running around that's going to be tackling people all over the field. It's not like you don't have great secondary play. Like, you're right, having a great corner, one of the best corners in the country that can shut down half the field. And I love, by the way, that he wasn't a 5-star, like just kind of a 3-star guy that wasn't highly recruited. But look what we found. Like, we got a gem. And does the style of defense continue to play with just straight man-to-man most of the time, and you're getting away with that? And so does that look different now when you bring in Devontae Smith from Alabama in the slot? And can you still do that? Because Clark was really good at that a year ago. So you're finding out all these things about your team. And here's the thing. How many points do I need to score, right? Like, is my defense really, really elite? Can they hold down Miami? Like, these are all questions that I'm learning on the fly, but I don't get to open up with a team down the stretch that I would like to open up with. I don't get to open up with a Marshall and an FIU or somebody like that we
don't talk about Marshall around here, David. We don't like those home runners against Marshall. We don't talk about
NIU. Oh wait,
exactly.
We don't talk about. I mean,
those are curse words on our show, David, and we don't use curse words on our show.
hey, look at what happened with NIU, and you go to the college football playoff and try to win the championship. So I think that will be predicated on what your team is. That's what I would say.
I want to say one thing. Trev's going to ask you here a question in a second, but
you're going to let Trevor talk? Good Lord.
Yeah. Every now and then, I let him get a word in every now and then.
Sometimes,
but I like to dominate. You mentioned the NIU loss, and that's, I say, you talk about things you get right, things you get wrong. That's something I got absolutely wrong. In that I really felt when they went to 12-team playoff, I was like, this is going to hurt the value of the regular season. And I was completely wrong about it, because a team can lose a game like that, and you still are judged on kind of who you are by the end of the year. I think to the 2016 USC team, 0 chance to make a 14 playoff because they started 1-3. By the end of November, nobody wanted a part of that 2016 USC team. And that's something that I think brings a lot of value. And I think that also can factor in 2 decisions with personnel, because, hey, if it is close, do you say, okay, this guy maybe helps us win now, but we think this guy can maybe help us win in November and December? Do you take that chance in November? Whereas in 2018, Notre Dame was like, we need Brandon Wimbush to beat Michigan. After that, we'll see how things go, because you couldn't afford to lose a game in September if you were Notre Dame.
Here's why I say, Brian, you can't take that chance, because what else is really left on the schedule after the first 2 games that's going to be something that people are going to go, yeah, love that. Like, I mean, Navy's not doing that for people. Like, NC State's not doing that for people. Boise's going to be straight. Like, Boise's a good one, but like, there's not a lot on the schedule down the stretch with Pittsburgh and Syracuse, and there's just not a lot of stretch down the stretch that I'm going to go, man, that's good. I believe in Notre Dame now. Like, ending with Stanford, is that going to blow anybody's socks off? Absolutely not. So I don't think
they're going to be rough.
I do think, early in the season, I think those games are pivotal, because that is perception, and that will matter. Now, listen, you rattle off, 10 straight or whatever. You don't have a conference championship. How does that match up? Like, there's just a lot of things that go in. You got to win one of those 2 games. Like, win one of those 2 games, and I think Notre Dame's in pretty good shape.
Because 11-1, they're in. The only question now is where they seated. Trev, I know you had a question that you wanted to follow up with, too, back to when we were looking at last year.
Yeah, it's the setup of the schedule is very similar. Last year, you kind of had your big marquee game against Texas A&M to kick off the season. And then behind that, you had Stanford, you had Navy, you had Army, you had a USC team that didn't live up to expectations, and then a Florida State team that Lord only knows what happened to them down the stretch. One of the crazier things that we've seen in college football. But when you go back to last year, we were talking before the show started, you said that you were extremely high on Notre Dame early. What was that point for you where you kind of looked at this team and said, hey, I think that they could do something this year?
I think it's when I started to see Riley Green and this offense understand exactly who they were. Like, I just remember starting to watch, a couple things too. Watching Freeman coach and the fake punts and like the going for it, like just the marbles, right? Like, I loved watching him grow as a coach, and you could just tell, like, and if it didn't work, it didn't work. So be it. Who cares? But I think Riley understanding, like, okay, we're not throwing this ball all over the yard, but I got to be efficient. I got to get the ball out quick. I got to throw it. If not, I'm going to take off and scramble. And I think you started to see that, middle of the season, towards the end of the season. Again, I don't always look at the most talented teams. Like, I want to know the teams that have an identity, and they know who they are. They know how they're going to beat you. They know, most importantly, what they aren't. And they weren't – in the beginning of the season, I saw drop back passes for Riley Leonard. That ain't who he is. That's not who he should have been. End of the season, I didn't see that crap all the time. I saw a coach in Denbrock, and that's why he's one of the better OCs in the country. Like, taking the guy he has – it ain't pretty. It don't have to be pretty. I don't need it to be pretty. Like, all I need is that run that you had last year. Like, nobody cares about how pretty it is. Like, nobody cares about that NIU game now. Nobody gives a rip because you beat Georgia at the end of the season. Like, you beat Penn State at the end of the season, right? Like, you got to play for a national championship. So I think, understanding who you are and be willing to do it throughout the year and evolve and not worry about the sexiness of it.
When you look at this Notre Dame team in 2025, obviously there's projection with everybody. Where do you see this team kind of stacking up as you enter into the season? Like, do you have them in that top echelon with a lot of the perceived teams, the Texases, the Ohio States, the Georgias, the Penn States? Do you think that there's still work to do? Where do you see them as far as, if you were like to create like tiers of teams, how do you view this team coming into the season?
Well, the interesting thing you say about that is, like, Texas obviously breaking in a new starter at quarterback, so there's some indecision. So does that cause for pause? So Notre Dame, same thing, right? Does it work for Notre Dame? Well, okay, there's question mark at quarterback. Do I feel the same way? Like, Texas's roster to me is in a better spot. Like, Texas takes a back seat to just about no one, I don't think, in the country. I don't think anybody. Like, if you're going through their defense and you go, who's the best edge player in the country? I got a debate. Who's the best linebacker in the country? I got a debate. Who's the best safety in the country? I got a debate. Like, Texas's defensive personnel is really, really good, man. Like, really good. Their system is the same. Everybody's back. They're not breaking in a new DC. They're not breaking in a new quarterback. Like, there's less things that I'm worried about. Like, some of the traditional, like Georgia. Like, obviously Notre Dame beat Georgia a year ago. I'm very confident with Georgia not changing much of who they are, adding a bunch of pieces. Like, I feel very confident saying they're going to be better this season. Alabama, I feel very confident saying they're going to be better this season. Like, Notre Dame, I want to see them develop with their identity. Here's what I know. they're going to be in every single football game because I think their defense is really good. And I could go down the list of guys literally that I could write down, whether it's Drake, whether it's Leonard Moore, whether it's Devontae Smith or Schuler, like whoever it is. Like, you got ballers, you got playmakers. Like, I'm very confident on that side of the football. I think without the quarterback, because this isn't a team that has the elite weapons out wide historically that makes, like Ohio State, dude, Alabama, like whoever you put in there, they're playing with a stacked deck. Like, it's really fun to play quarterback when you got Jeremiah Smith, who you go like this, air grenade, shoom, all you got to do is throw that puppy up in the air, and there's a good chance he's going to come down with it. Ryan Williams, good chance he's going to come down with it, right? So I think, that's where I would say there's a little bit of separations between some of those teams is the weapons on offense. Love is a weapon. I'm interested to see the breakdown of the carries this year. Does he get more carries? Because I think he should. Like, and Price is a great changeup. But like, this team to me is an even more leaning on your running backs team as opposed to your quarterback being able to run as much as he was a year ago.
Do you think this team can make a run similar to last year if they don't become more balanced? Because look, Kenny Minchie's a good athlete. He's not Riley Leonard. And CJ Carr's a red
people
freshman.
Don't understand. People don't understand it. Like the thing about Riley that always blew me away was he felt holes so well, and then backers who had angles, he quickly erased them and made moves. Like, I don't think people understood how good he was with the foot. He was another running back. Like, and then. Just the toughness and the real. I'll never forget that image of him puking, like basically running the ball every single play on that first drive in the national championship and just puking on the sidelines, exhausted from the first. I'm like, dude, he might have 40 carries this game. Like, if they're gonna win, he might have to tote that thing a lot.
That's what it started to feel like. Definitely what it started to feel like.
I mean, and you saw it. Now, later in the game, the arm picked up and Great House picked up and playmaking picked up, and that's the thing. If that can, what if losing Leonard and that part elevates 5 completion percentage? Just a little bit better on that side of the football. That would be fantastic, and that opens up some space for Love. That makes it easier for the line. But again, the short yardage when you have to run it, that will be very interesting.
Yeah, and that's why they went out and got Malachi Fields and Will Pauling to go with Greathouse and Faison, because you got to the point last year when Notre Dame's success throwing the ball was because they had to. They were down 10-3. They couldn't run the ball a whole lot in the first half against Penn State. They're down 31-7 against Ohio State. They weren't able to just come out and establish that against teams. I mean, they tried it against Ohio State, and Riley just took them a while sometimes to get into that rhythm. I think Marcus Freeman knows we can't just keep repeating what we did last year, because you can't assume you're going to have a Riley Leonard every year. And I think that is something that's going to be important. You need Malachi Fields to be everything you think he is. You need Will Pauling to look like the guy that faced against LSU in the bowl game a couple years ago. And you need Greathouse to be like, that wasn't just a
4-game run,
flash in the pan. This is kind of who you are. Not that he's going to go for 6 or 7 and over 100 every game, but like, just this is the kind of guy that's that you got to contend with week after week. And I do think they're going to move him around a lot more this year, not just have it so static where where he's going to be all the time. Trev, I know you had a question you wanted to follow up about with him. I know Dave wants to talk a little defense. I have a feeling he kind of likes talking a little bit of defense.
Never do I mind that.
Yeah. I think he knows a little bit of something or two about defense. Something tells me. But we talked about some of where Notre Dame hasn't quite closed the gap yet on offense, talent on the outside. But when you look at them on defense, you said that you're extremely confident in their abilities they're going to be in every game because of who their defense is, what their makeup is. So when you evaluate the talent overall, what do you see on Notre Dame's defense?
Well, just like last year, led the nation in interceptions. And I saw a bunch of guys that were extremely, here's why I say that. Here's why I'll say this. That was really hard to do because it's not like they were fooling a bunch of people. Like, they were very good at what they did and they stuck to it. And that's really, when you're good enough, like the Seattle Seahawks when they won those championships, like, everybody knew they were playing cover 3, but the talent was so daggum good, and they were so good at the system that they continued to find ways to be elite and to dominate football games. And I think you saw a dominant unit against the pass. And can you do that again? Like, obviously, listen, it ain't like you don't lose pieces as well. It ain't like I can't pick some guys that you go crap that. But here's the thing: every time last year in the playoffs, when you lose your best defensive lineman, all good, not a big deal. Like, next man up. And here's what I saw about the next man. The next man was tough. The next man fought. maybe not as talented, but they make you earn everything. That's what I love. Like, I love the scrapping, the toughness. Like, I'm going to hit you. And listen, I mentioned the names with Bowman, who's going to tackle everybody, and Moore, who's going to cover everybody, and Schuler, who'll play the back end and play it great. Like, defensively, Chris Ash is at the same system. But as long as the hunger's there, listen, I can't teach people how to compete. Like, the only way I do that is by the way I bring it every single day. Like, is Ash going to be able to get the most out of these guys and maximize their talent? Because they were maximized a year ago. Like, they played their brand, their style. They imposed their style on an SEC University of Georgia team. Like, think about that. Like, end of the game, needed some first downs. Riley Leonard. First down, run out the clock. Like, Freeman, and I always want to say Morgan Freeman. Marcus, obviously. Marcus Freeman, the balls to call what he called down the stretch and not quote-unquote fake punt to draw him off sides. Knew exactly what he was doing, right? Like, how he's going to take that step, continue to mature. The defense, I think the defense is going to be really, really good. Now, is it going to be elite like it was a year ago? That's where Chris Ash has to show me that. Like, the running game, is it going to be elite like it was a year ago? That's where the new quarterback, whoever it is, Carr Minchie, whatever one that is, like, they are going to have to show me and they're going to have to prove it. Like, but I can tell you the proven things that I know is going to come out of Notre Dame. And the good thing about, if I'm a Notre Dame fan, the provens are a lot more than they used to be, man. Mm-hmm. Like, it's not just one position. It's not just, hey, that we have great tight ends at Notre Dame. Hey, Notre Dame, we put out great offensive linemen. Like, that's what you want to be. You want to be a program like we got the best corner in the country. We got the best running back in the country. Hey, we got the best, one of the best offensive line in the country. A bunch of experience coming back. Hey, don't forget about our D lineman. Hey, we got this linebacker. Hey, we got this safety. Like, that's pretty fun when you start being in the mix for all of that.
So if I'm reading you correctly, here's kind of my takeaway, that Notre Dame has raised their bar from a talent standpoint. But the question you have, and I think this is actually a fair one if I'm reading you correctly, is what Notre Dame has to prove in 2025 is that you can reload the way that Ohio State has proven that they can lose guys. They can lose a Xavier Watts type and just reload. They can lose a Riley Leonard and reload. They can lose a Riley Mills and reload. Because like you said, they played hard, but there was a drop-off. And we saw that against Ohio State when they couldn't get any pressure on the quarterback with the front four. And so is that kind of what you need to see from them?
I trust those teams even without knowing who their quarterbacks are, because I've already seen it. They've done it year in and year out. Like, it's like, man, this guy's new. Georgia, like, there's going to be a lot of new pieces. I know they're going to be good. Like, Kirby Smart has recruited at an elite level for a long time now. They develop players at an elite level. Like, did they have a down year for Georgia standards? Absolutely. Like, they had a down year. But I also know that they have a ton of talented guys that are going to step right in. They had 12 guys drafted or something like that. Like, there's another 12 that are going to be drafted. Like, I mean, it's to that point. Notre Dame is building to that point. Marcus Freeman has now put the world on notice. Like, this ain't this cute little leprechaun team no more. It's not the cute touchdown Jesus anymore. Like, we're going to punch you right between the face. We're going to recruit at a high level. Like, I'm going to be aggressive. That's my style of who I am, what I am. Special teams a year ago, you could also argue, wasn't great. Like, get better on special teams. The squad will be better, especially field goal kicking. And then making a statement like this isn't a flash in the pan. Like, we're here to stay. And that's what Irish fans want. And Irish fans are one of the best in the country. And they just want that competitiveness year after year. They want to be one of the big boys. Like, they want to be that, and they've had so much success in the past, and they want it to be the present year after year.
Well, Trevor's brought this up this summer multiple times. Is look, they had the 2012 season, great, 12-0, and then the next year you go 9-4. You have the 2015 season, you follow that up with 4-6. You know, you have the 2018 playoff team, and then the next year you go 1-2 against ranked teams. Your only ranked win is Navy. You know, they haven't been able to follow up the big years with another year, and that's the reason I wanted to ask you that question, is because we as Notre Dame people, we know this guy, we can feel how we want to feel, but nationally, there's still that, okay, we know you can have the occasional good season, but can you string it up? And like Texas, for example, like, I think Texas still has a lot to prove, but it's in regard to, can they win a championship? They're back-to-back Final Four teams. They've been able to stack those two teams in a row. I would love to cover a program where your down year is when you win the SEC championship and lose in the quarterfinals. That's the year where everybody's like, what happened to Georgia? and that's where you got to get to. And I think that's why this season is so important for Notre Dame, because you have to be able to show, hey, we're not like we were, where we have the occasional 0-2 season or 0-5 season, and then it's not followed up by something comparable. You got to show that, no, we're here and we're here to stay, because not only does that send a statement in college football and earn respect, but the biggest people that earns respect with is recruits who can say, okay, yeah, I know that I'm going to be able to continue to do that under Marcus Freeman. And I mean, you went through this as a player yourself.
Yeah, you want to see that sustained success. You want to compete for championships. And it's just, it's so crazy to think about, like Brian Kelly leaving LSU or leaving Notre Dame and going to LSU because he didn't think he could get those kids at Notre Dame. And now the best running back in the country, like one of the most explosive playmakers in the country is at Notre Dame. And it's just like, you can, but you need that guy. And I think Marcus Freeman being that guy, the no nonsense, I promise you dudes, like he walks into every household in America and he can talk to any family. Like he can talk to anybody. Like sit there, have an honest conversation, show his personality, and who he is enough to be great. Like who he is enough to get elite level recruits, and having the youth on his side, like just being able to relate to the kids a little bit more, the defensive mindset, the aggressiveness. Like he's kind of showing you, man, he's just taking those steps. And I don't know how much outside of like Ryan Day can't win a big one, can't win a big one, can't win a big one. He won the big one. Like Dan Lanning is very much on that list for the next young coach that can he win a big one. Marcus Freeman, like have another year, again, another great season. Can he win the big one? Like, is he that next young gun? But I think everything's pointing in the right direction, and there's just reason to be optimistic about year after year, sustained success. And that's what Notre Dame fans want.
I mean, that's you look at Notre Dame's recruiting right now. You're going down to Texas and getting Leonard Moore. You're going to St. Louis and getting a Jeremiah Love. Their current class, which is a top 5 class, you beat Georgia for a 5-star kid out of North Carolina. You beat Alabama for a D tackle out of Florida. You've got to be able to have those battles. You can't always rely on, well, we think this 3-star guy is going to become there will be those guys. Tyler Eifert was that guy. But you can't make a living on the Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah. You also need to add more Jalen Smiths and guys that are that high level player, because it's just the margin for error on and this is why I always said stars don't matter in regard to, they don't define you. You don't put a star on a guy and that tells you who is he going to be. But if you're going to bring in a bunch of 3-stars, some of them will pan out, but a lot of them will be what 3-stars are. It's about the high level talent. You've got to find it in all levels. And that's where I think Notre Dame is different now, because and my final question for you is this, David, is like when you were there, I mean, you were watching Notre Dame in Georgia. When I watched Notre Dame in the past against Georgia, they could in 17 and 19, Notre Dame could go at Georgia in the trenches. They couldn't beat them on the perimeter. They just couldn't make plays on the perimeter. That's why they lost 2 close games. This year, they did. They could run with Georgia at linebacker. They could run with Georgia, on the perimeter defensively, not offensively, but defensively. And I think that's something that makes this team a little bit different, in my opinion. And now you just got, like you said, you got to sustain it.
Well, I think it was like 26 or 24 of the first 32 picks in the draft last year were from the SEC and the Big Ten. Like, that's a big number. Like, that's a really, really big number. So year after year, the talent is there. Like, the talent is abundant. Like, that's not a made up thing, right? Like, they have that consistently. So I think that's what you're trying to compete with. Like, can I be in that realm? 5 stars and 4 stars. They were 5-star or a 4-star. Like, that's the numbers. Like 20 something out of 32 first round picks were 4 or 5 stars out of high school. Like, it's not rocket science. Better players. I'm a really good coach, guys. Like, I'm a much better coach when I have a better athlete that can pick up things faster, do things better at a higher level. Like, and so there is no team in the country that is constantly at the top that doesn't recruit nationally at a high level. And that's why we're putting Texas in there, because since NIL, Texas is shot through the roof, right? Like, that's why Bama's been in there every single year. That's why Georgia's been in there every year. That's why Ohio State's in there every year. Like, go look at the recruiting. They own the recruiting. That's why Clemson was there for so long. Own the recruiting. Fell back a little bit. Like, Clemson's in a state now with that. Like, can you show me the receivers that you used to have? And this year they got them. Like, Absolutely got them. Chris, they've also got the D linemen again that they used to have.
Yeah.
They've got NFL talent. Not surprising, guys. They've got 4- and 5-star draft picks that are now, or high school guys that are going to be draft picks. And that's, you don't have to live on the 4 and the 5 stars, but you have to compete with them. You have to grab a bunch of them every single year. And then how you coach and what your culture is and how you develop will define the rest of it. But if you can't get those guys, you're bringing a knife to a gunfight.
Yeah, I mean, it's about that high level talent. Can you run? Can you compete size wise, physicality wise, and can you run with the best teams? I think that ultimately is what it comes down to. David, I really appreciate your time. Before we get you out of here, do me a favor, if you could, let people know where they can find you. Obviously, your C-Ball Get Ball podcast is now on the Believe Network, but I know you also do another podcast, which I'd love for you to be able to talk about also, because one thing that I respect about you is you're someone who's open about your faith, which is something that we appreciate here and something that we like to be on our show. We have people asking for prayer and different things like that in our show. So I would like for you to be able,
cool.
if you don't mind, pointing people to where they can get your other podcasts as well that they can watch, which is, I don't believe is at sports related specifically.
No.
It's more about life and things like that. So why don't you let people know where they can find you?
Yeah, it's called Family Goals. That one's called Family Goals. It's with my pastor. It's literally like me and him were talking about, like, we should help everybody with their family goals and just set goals and set boundaries, especially like in sports and the world of travel ball and stuff. And we ended up, all right, let's do a podcast. And so we ended up doing a podcast. We never thought anybody would listen. And sure enough, it actually, a couple people listen besides my mom. So Family Goals with my pastor, like teach you how to outline, goals in your household. We're really, we're strong believers that believe in God and are pursuing and sharing our faults and the things we mess up. And then C-Ball Get Ball, man, like just because of my wife, my wife has brain cancer and she's fighting and battling. And so right now, like, I'm not traveling and I'm not going to travel. And so I love this sport, man. Like, I love college football. There's nothing better, and to be able to talk it and watch it. Like, and listen, I love sitting on the couch all day on a Saturday. My wife can't say anything. This is my job, David. Like, you can't yell at me. Like, I gotta eat.
Isn't that beautiful?
Just sit here. It's so gorgeous. Like,
I come home with the app on, and I'm like, sorry, babe, it's for work. I have to, I have to get it. I gotta watch
what you want me to
football.
do, baby doll?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that is so much fun. And the name is not surprising if you know me. Like, C-Ball Get Ball, dumb defensive player, like snap the ball, I move, I tackle guy with ball. Like, just, it made a lot of sense to call it C-Ball Get Ball. So appreciate you talking about those though.
And we will certainly be praying for your wife and also for you as you all go through this as a family. And I know the IB community is already putting that in the chat that they're going to be keeping you on in our prayers as well. So David, appreciate that. Welcome to the Believe Network. Thank you so much for joining our show, and we'll see how the season goes. Maybe at the end of the year, we'll see how things go at Notre Dame, get you back and talk a little bit more about what you see from this team. And we'll have the answer if Marcus Freeman can kind of keep it running. Is this the new normal for Notre Dame, or is this just another one of those occasionally really good years with a gritty team? Or is this just who they are? So we appreciate
it's the new normal, baby. Get used to it, baby. It's going to be fun.
It's good for business, and we're both Notre Dame fans, so it's going to be fun for us too. We think so. But we're also both, you got to show me now, guys, right? Like, we feel good about it, but now it's time to show me. Got to show me.
Nothing wrong with that. All right, Brian, Trevor, see you guys.
Thanks, David. Take care. Well, Trev, that was it. That was David Pollack talking Notre Dame football. I wanted to bring him on because, like, I remember listening to him back when he was with ESPN, and you'd hear his comments where he was very critical of Notre Dame, and I think a lot of times for good reason. And so to hear him now talk about them very differently, it wasn't to say, hey, let's call them out. How have you now? You used to be wrong about Notre Dame. Now you're right. Let's talk about it. But just let's talk about someone who's not a Notre Dame person, who is an SEC type of person, and to see how they view Notre Dame. And when you start to hear some of the things from him and Greg McElroy, for example, someone else who's very high on Notre Dame, you start to say, okay, like people are starting to see what we see. Like, we're not the only ones, because if it's like we're just a bunch of Notre Dame fans talking about how much we love Notre Dame, but everybody else is like, guys, I've seen them in person and I've seen this team in person. It ain't the same, So I'm glad he came on, and I'm glad he's part of the Believe Network. And as we said, you guys can find his C-Ball Get Ball podcast. I put a link to that in the chat just above, and then also I put a link to his Family Goals podcast. Also, as he talked about, guys, we always have people in our show that are asking for prayer and different things like that. If you guys could keep David and his wife in your prayers. And, my wife's going to have surgery soon, and you start thinking about, like, I'm stressed about that and those type of things. But his wife, Lindsay's battling brain cancer. I mean, it's quite a different thing. And so if you guys could keep her in your prayers and keep David in his prayers, because it's tough for her, but also you got to be that strong rock for your family at home and for him and his wife and his kids. And he's also coaching football this year. He's coaching at his son's high school team. So he can now talk about coaching. So good stuff. But Trev, just overall thoughts on that segment with David before we move on to our Big Ten conversation?
Yeah, man. I mean, it was good to hear the outside perspective. It's really easy for us to sit here and talk about, well, the national media this and the national media that thinks this of Notre Dame. And it was good to get a level-headed person in here that can break down and analyze a bunch of different teams. And I know some people just think David Pollack is a Georgia alum. He's a big SEC guy. Sure. Spent a lot of time talking about Ohio State and the talent that they have on the perimeter. He can take a look at what Notre Dame has on their roster, acknowledge what they have, but then also discuss some of the gaps that we said. We're high on Notre Dame's receiving core, maybe a little bit more than some, but the questions are still there. We can point to, well, he did this at this school at this year against these opponents, and he did this in that bowl game against this school while he was at this school. But until they put it all together, and those are valid points, which I appreciated. So it was cool to get him on, and then obviously from a fan standpoint, like it was cool to be able to sit down and talk to him as well.
Well, I just like people that talk ball, right or wrong. Yeah. As I've said, I don't agree with everything David Pollack says, and I'm quite confident if he listened to our show all the time, he wouldn't agree with everything that I say. I just like people that are willing to talk ball. And your opinions are about ball and what you see. And if I have an opinion about a team 3 years ago and now I see something different, I'm going to change my opinion, not just continue what our issue is. I don't have a problem with not everybody being bought into Notre Dame this year. But don't give me the tired, lazy takes as to why. Like his takes were what? They got to show that they can reload, something they haven't proven they can do. And I don't know what's going to happen to quarterback. I haven't seen Notre Dame lose a CJ Stroud and go out and still score a lot of points. Or I should say lose Dwayne Haskins, and the next year you just replace him with Justin Fields. And then you lose Justin Fields and you replace him with CJ Stroud. I mean, those teams have established that. Notre Dame hasn't proven that they can do that. I think those are fair concerns and fair criticisms. Yeah. And so that's why I wanted to get him on the show, to give a different perspective from an outsider who has lived in a world as a player and as an analyst where Notre Dame doesn't reload every year, as you've pointed out all summer, Trevor, which is last year was great. And we think this team is going to be really good again, but they got to prove to the rest of college football that they are that team. And that's what I'm really looking forward to for this season. So very excited to have David as part of the Believe Network, and he's going to be having his own FanDuel comments here coming up, but that was really good stuff. So that's going to do it for this portion of the show. We are going to talk Big Ten football next here with Trevor. But before we do, folks, do us a favor, hit that like button, hit the subscribe button on our channel. Make sure that you have the notifications on. So obviously today we went at a different time because we wanted to work around David's schedule. We thought about going at 1 and then having him jump in the middle. I just thought it'd be better to start the show with him, and then we can just talk Big Ten football the rest of the show. So that was fun. I thought he was every bit as good as I thought he was going to be. Make sure you also subscribe to David's podcast, See Ball, Get Ball. And if you want to hear him talk about just life and faith and things like that, you can also subscribe to his Family Goals podcast with Pastor Jay. So you can check that out. But as always, make sure that you are subscribed to what we have going on here at the Irish Breakdown Podcast. It's part 2 of today's show, Trevor, of the Irish Breakdown Podcast, brought to you by FanDuel. Is we're going to talk about the Big Ten and how we've done it the last couple days. Is we're going to start off with kind of talking Notre Dame and the Big Ten. And the first two shows we did ACC and SEC for a reason, and that is obviously ACC first. Notre Dame has a big slate of games against the ACC this year, volume wise. Not necessarily like the big games this year are not ACC opponents. Then you look at the SEC, and it's okay. You've got 2 pretty big games against SEC teams this year. Arguably the best team you're going to play is the SEC, and that's the conference you're still trying to prove yourself against. Then we come to the Big Ten, and whenever you talk about the Big Ten, the conversation is not the same. It's okay. should Notre Dame be in the Big Ten? Should they join the Big Ten? What Big Ten team should they be playing? When you look at Notre Dame's schedule this year, they have 2 Big Ten opponents, but honestly, Purdue's not very good, and nobody really views USC as a Big Ten team. They just happen to be in that league. It's one of the West Coast versions of it. You don't have a schedule littered with the traditional Big Ten teams like you used to have. When I was growing up, Trevor, in September, almost every year, Notre Dame's playing Purdue, Michigan, and Michigan State almost every year. And then there's years where Northwestern is mixed in and Indiana was mixed in the 90s one time. You know, you'd get some of those other games mixed in. You played Ohio State in the mid-90s, and so you'd have Northwestern on there. So, I mean, 1993, Notre Dame kicks the season off against Northwestern. And that year, I believe Notre Dame played 3 Big Ten teams that year. Obviously, you played Michigan, you played Michigan State, you played Purdue, Northwestern. Actually, the first 4 games of the year were all Big Ten teams. Northwestern, at Michigan, home against Michigan State, at Purdue, all wins. And so that used to be a big part of the schedule. And whenever people talk about, when Notre Dame's going to join a league, it's going to be the Big Ten. So there's always that natural connection between Notre Dame and the Big Ten. So what we're going to do in part 1 of today's show is we're going to talk about Notre Dame versus the Big Ten, but not in the same way to where the schedule proves anything against the Big Ten this year. Because if you beat USC this year, for example, no one's going to be like, man, Notre Dame against the Big Ten is really – no, they're still sort of they're in the Big Ten, but they're not really a Big Ten team. Beating Purdue by 100 doesn't do anything for anybody. If anything, if you don't beat them by 50 points, it's like, wow, you guys didn't even beat Purdue by as much as these 4 other Big Ten teams did. It's more so this conversation is about what should Notre Dame's relationship be like with the Big Ten, and that's where we'll kick things off today, Trev.
Yeah, to your point about perception, when you start talking about the Big Ten, look, man, there's one opponent in the Big Ten that it will change the perception of Notre Dame if they beat, and that's Ohio State. But it's not a conference-wide thing.
Right.
And that's
and
the
you don't
one
know that you're going
drag
to play them this year. So
exactly.
It's like, yeah.
Exactly. And so we start getting into the discussion of what should Notre Dame's outlook against the Big Ten be like for years down the road. Obviously, where the USC rivalry hangs in the balance, it's a little bit questionable. But outside of that, let's talk about the core Big Ten teams. Because, Brian, to your point, when I hear Big Ten, I don't think USC. When I hear Big Ten, I don't think Washington. I don't think UCLA. I don't think Oregon. I think of Ohio State, Michigan, Michigan State, Purdue, Wisconsin. Different age groups here, but I also tend to think of Nebraska too, just because I don't remember them being elite in the Big 12.
Definitely different age group.
Yeah. But
it still feels weird to me to say that.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Penn State. I forgot about them too on accident.
Yeah.
But I also think
another team that I don't view as a traditional Big Ten team, because when I was growing up watching Notre Dame play the Penn State, they were an independent. Yeah.
Yep. So what we did before the show is, Brian and I were talking, and we went through and we broke down what Notre Dame's schedule looked like against the Big Ten, basically from now until 2034, really, because that's the next time they have a home-and-home scheduled with Michigan. I know that's a hot topic at this conversation as well. But, Brian, when you look at it, it kind of posed the question, should Notre Dame kind of ramp up how many Big Ten teams they play? Yeah. And I think that's a valid question.
I do. I mean, look, Notre Dame is in this period where the next couple of years are, for the most part, scheduled. And there are some Big Ten teams on the schedule over the next couple of years. I mean, obviously this year they play Purdue. They play USC this year. Whether or not they play USC next year is still kind of a little up in the air. I've heard USC say, hey, well, we've offered to play them again in 2026 if they're willing to do whatever. And we don't know that that's going to necessarily still be the case. But you look at next season, they start the season off against Wisconsin in Lambeau Field. They play Michigan State at home next season. They play Purdue and Michigan State in 2027, Purdue in 2028, nobody in 2029. For now, there's a lot of games left to schedule for that season. 2030 and 31, they play Indiana. For now, we'll see if the Hoosiers back out of that game. And then in 33 and 34, they play Michigan. So there is a Big Ten presence on the schedule the next couple of years. I mean, they play 4 different Big Ten teams the next 2 seasons, USC, Purdue, Wisconsin, and Michigan State. So the question is, okay, you've got the 4 to 5 every year for the ACC. You've got Navy on your schedule every year. You'd like to continue playing USC every year. So let's just for now say that Notre Dame and USC agree to a 10-year extension of their deal. So they're going to play through 2035. So let's get that out of the way. Then it's like, okay, what should the rest of their schedule look like? And what should the Big Ten influence be on it and why? And I think there's two aspects to why I think the Big Ten should be on it. And the first is going to be in an era where tradition is becoming more and more dismissed and thrown to the side. Notre Dame needs to be a leader, in my opinion, in reestablishing some of that. I really do believe that. I think that if you want tradition to matter again, then you have to, as schools who talk about the importance of tradition, have to then do things to keep that. And while USC being on the schedule every year should be important to Notre Dame, I don't necessarily think that Notre Dame should continue to bend over backwards to play the game whenever USC feels like it. But I do think that if you're going to say, okay, well, tradition matters, then put your money where your mouth is a little bit from a scheduling standpoint. And I do think making the Big Ten a more prominent part of the schedule matters. I don't want Notre Dame to join the Big Ten. I don't ever want Notre Dame to join the Big Ten, like as a full-time member. But I do believe in tradition. I do believe in respecting rivalries. And I do believe that Notre Dame as a school that now wields a lot of power from a TV standpoint, from a playoff standpoint, from a conference standpoint. They have for a decade. You go back to the role that Jack Swarbrick had in sort of keeping the Pac-12 from eating the Big 12 alive back in 2010 and 11. And I think that there's something along those lines where I say I want to see the Big Ten more on the schedule, not because I want some pathway to joining the league, but I want Notre Dame to kind of get back a little bit to being Notre Dame from a scheduling standpoint. And the question then is, well, what does that look like? And I think that's where you can have some debate. But I believe you should have at least 2 traditional Big Ten teams on your schedule every year. And when I say traditional, I'm okay with saying Penn State is part of that because they have been in the Big Ten since the early 90s. That's at least long enough. That's kind of like saying Arkansas in the SEC. You've been in there almost 30 years. I get it. I don't view Nebraska as being that team just because they didn't join until the 2000s, and I still view them as a Big 8 team. But I do think you should have 2 traditional Big Ten teams on your schedule. The question is who? And is it a consistent 2 teams or is it a bit of a rotation? And I think that's the first question that I'll pose to you, Trevor. If Notre Dame was going to say, okay, we're going to play 2 Big Ten teams every year, what do you think that should look like? 2 set teams, a rotation of 2 teams, 1 block set for traditional rivals and 1 block set for others? How do you think that should look?
I think it should be a rotation of teams, but give yourself room, like a margin for error, I guess. Because look, when you're scheduling games out to 29 and 2030 and 2031, you're not going to know how good these teams are going to be from year to year. So give yourself a little bit of variance. I think it should be a rolling team or teams every given year. One of the reasons is something that you pointed to earlier this offseason that's kind of stuck with me, and I think about it when I think about the Big Ten. Goal for Notre Dame is to obviously go back and win a national championship. I'm sure that we can all agree that that's the ultimate goal every single year. Well, earlier this offseason, you said that it's hard to win a national championship when you're not the best team in your region. It's difficult. And as much as I like the 12-year deal with Clemson, and as much as I like them getting down and playing, Arkansas this year, and they played Texas A&M last year, and they're getting into the SEC, it's a little difficult when the last 2 national championship winners were right in your backyard. About a baseball throw away into the border into Michigan, and then about an hour and a half drive east into Ohio. And so I would love the idea for them to have a rotating schedule with the Big Ten. Rotating meaning you play at least 2 traditional Big Ten teams every year, but maybe the home and homes rotate every 2 to 4 years. So you're not locked into, let's just say for argument's sake, they go with Michigan State, a traditional rival. They play for the megaphone. But then for the next 12 years, you're not locked into playing Michigan State every single year. I think that gives you a little bit of variety and a little bit room for, that's what I mean by variance. if somebody wants to bang their fist on the table for Purdue, I'm cool with that. That's more of the age thing, because my entire life, Notre Dame has lost to Purdue once. I didn't watch the Drew Brees Purdue. I wasn't old enough to remember what that looked like.
But even that team though, Trev, like they beat Notre Dame like a couple times back then. It wasn't something like they were just whooping Notre Dame like 4 out of 5 years. They beat them in 03, 04, and 07. So since 2000, those are the only 3 wins that they've had. It's not so much about it being a contested rivalry. I think it's more about it's just a traditional rival. It's a team that you've played a lot. It's a local in-state school. And one thing about Purdue that I think that, because like they've played Purdue, if I'm doing the math correctly, it'd be it's been over 80 times. Don't play Purdue. Purdue sucks. You guys, sometimes people kill me. They say like, you look at a schedule like, well, that's a crazy schedule in 2029. Okay, but isn't that what you're asking for when you say stop playing Purdue, stop playing MAC teams? Like, okay, so who are they supposed to schedule, guys? They can't play bad Power 5 teams. They can't play MAC teams. So who exactly do you want them to schedule? What do you want their schedule to look like? Okay, you open the season with a home game against Ohio State, then you travel to Alabama, and then you host Georgia, then you got to travel to LSU, and then you've got the Spartans come to town, and then you got to go to USC. Like, it's good sometimes to have a traditional rival on your schedule besides just Navy that you do win most of the time. And it is a game where, in this era where travel's so expensive, it's nice to be able to hop on a bus and go down to West Lafayette for a game and not have to fly. So sure. I do think there's merit to that game. Is there enough merit to say you're going to play it every year? I think that's more of the question.
And that's my point of, you don't want to get locked into just that one opponent, because outside of the tradition, I agree, you don't want your schedule to be, you get Georgia, then Texas, then Alabama, then Ohio State, and then LSU. And then I get that, but also find the in-between of Purdue and Alabama. And so you still get the tradition of playing Purdue, call it maybe every other 2 years or every other 4 years, or however you want it, because I do believe in tradition. That's what makes Notre Dame great. But I can also look at it and say playing Purdue as a program does virtually nothing for Notre Dame, big picture. Nobody's going to look at them at the end of the year and say, hey, the Irish beat Purdue. That's not going to matter.
Here's why I think that the notion that they don't do anything for Notre Dame is misguided. Because if they aren't good, it's good to have weeks like that. When you've got Texas A&M coming up the next week, or you've got Alabama coming up the next week, or you've got Texas coming up the next week, it's nice to have a game before where you can beat a team 66-7. Yeah. And it's not a MAC team, because beating Purdue 66-7 is going to carry a little bit more weight, not a ton, than beating Central Michigan 66-7. But you're still getting that easy win. And that's where I say is I think sometimes we look past, no, that actually is a good thing, because that means their starting running back only had 15 snaps and he's going to be more rested when you go play this team. So like in that regard, I do think it does something for you. It doesn't help your resume from the standpoint of that's making or breaking where you're seated, but it can help you be better prepared for that next week when you are playing that team that's going to impact your seeding, that you're not having gauntlet after gauntlet after gauntlet after gauntlet. And that's why I think playing Purdue more frequently helps Notre Dame. I will say this, if you can only play 2 Big Ten teams per year, I don't want Purdue taking up that slot, one of those slots every single year. I've advocated for this, Trevor, and tell me what you think. I think I'd have 2 slots that are sort of rotating slots. In the first slot, I'm rotating Purdue and Michigan State every 2 years. Home and home, home and home, home and home, home and home with Purdue and Michigan State. Because those are the 2 Big Ten rivals that matter the most to me. They've played both of them way more than they've played Michigan. Though Michigan State especially is a school that was very pro Notre Dame joining the Big Ten both times that Notre Dame tried to join. And that's why they always kind of hold a little bit of a special place in my heart. When everybody else was saying, no, you can't be in it, you can't be in it, you can't be in it, we can't have a Catholic school, this reason, that reason, Michigan State was one of the schools that advocated for Notre Dame being in the Big Ten. That's a rival that matters more to me. It's sort of similar. It's not to the same degree, but it's kind of like why you still play Navy every year. If I was going to add any Big Ten team, and you say you have to add one Big Ten team not named USC to your schedule every year, I'd pick Michigan State over anybody else for those reasons. And there are going to be more years where Michigan State is good, where beating them gives you a big win than Purdue, to your point. There are years where maybe a couple other teams are down, like 2017. Well, part of what made that schedule so impressive and that resume so impressive was you did go on the road and beat a 10-win, top 15 ranked Michigan State team that's end of the year ranking convincingly. And there's been years where, boy, that was a great win. Like, I mean, you think about was it 2013 when Michigan State goes 13-1 and their only loss was to Notre Dame, and so, I mean, Michigan State made the college football playoff in 2015. Purdue's not going to sniff the college football playoffs. Even under Drew Brees, they weren't like that. They made the Rose Bowl one year, but I believe the year they made the Rose Bowl, I think they had 3 losses. I'm going to go back and look at that, but I'm pretty sure that they were not like a game away from playing for the national championship. They lost to Notre Dame that year. This is 2000. That wasn't even a great Notre Dame team. That's the team that finished 9-3 and got blown out by Oregon State. They lost at Penn State and then lost to Michigan State. They did beat Ohio State. They beat Michigan that year. They beat Northwest. That's one of the greatest years Purdue's ever had since the 60s and 70s when they were a powerhouse. And then they go lose to Washington in the Rose Bowl. They finished 8-4. It's like, but they're not a team that like, boy, they were a field goal here away from being in the college football playoff. Michigan State has had teams like that over the years. Now, will they get back to that under Jonathan Smith? I don't know. But there's been more periods in history the last 50 years that Michigan State's been that kind of team, including 2021, very recently, where I think Michigan's only loss in the regular season in 2021, I believe, was to Michigan State, correct? So that's where I'd say if you had to pick one, I'd go with Michigan State or Purdue. I think the more likely scenario for me would be, like you said, a rotation where it's 2, 2, 2, 2, home and away, home and away, home and away. And that one slot gets taken up by one of those two teams. Then you have sort of a rotation there. That would be my thoughts on that. First of all, what are your thoughts on that? And then my second question for you is, Trevor, I think that I would like to have 3 Big Ten slots on my resume, so to speak, for Notre Dame if they lose USC. If USC doesn't want to play them every year, that's fine. I'm still going to the Big Ten to fill that spot. Now, I think you could add one of those teams to a longer-term contract like you did Clemson. You could then say, okay, hey, Michigan State or Purdue, let's sign you up to a long-term deal. So that way we got one slot taken care of. We don't have to worry about it. Now you've got 2 spots now that we're going to look to fill with Big Ten teams. Because trust me, there's a lot of Big Ten teams that would love to play Notre Dame on a regular basis. And at least, like, when I say regular basis, I don't mean like every year, but like, hey, let's get a home and home every 5, 6, 7 years. There's a lot of teams like that because it's good for their programs. And so that's something I would say is, if I'd be okay with 3 overall, but if you lose USC, that's my first thought is let's try to get that slot replaced by traditional Big Ten teams, and then maybe mix in a Washington, who Notre Dame does have some history with, into that equation as well. Thoughts?
Yeah, I think one of the things that would benefit Notre Dame is if they're able to, if USC gets out off of the schedule, let's say, I want them to pick a team that they sign for 12 years. And I think a good school for that would be Michigan State, because I think that gives you some sort of foundation. Because you could get into a situation where it gets a little bit too messy, where it's like, okay, we got these 2 schools for these 2 years and these 2 schools for these 2 years. And then sometimes the schedules are overlap, and then one is home and away. And then we're going to schedule 4 completely, different games. So I think if you pick a school, I love the Michigan State pick. One, I think there is a lot of benefit on both sides. It's a recognized rivalry. You play for a trophy, play for the megaphone. I think that they've played enough good games over the years, impactful, meaningful games, to your point, that it's okay, there's something to this. Why were we excited about them signing a 12-year-long deal with Clemson? Well, the 18 playoff, the 15 game in a hurricane, essentially, the remnants of a hurricane that almost went to overtime, the 2020 upset in South Bend, then a rematch in the ACC championship. And so there was meaningful games behind it, which is my point. So if you get that with Michigan State, one, that helps give them a gauge as well to where they're at relative to consistent playoff competition, assuming Notre Dame does what we think they're going to do over the next 5 to 10 years. Yep. And so that's a good gauge for Michigan, because what we're going to get into later in the show is not every Big Ten team is going to play Ohio State, Oregon, Penn State, and Michigan every single year. And so I think that would give them a good gauge. And I think that would be beneficial for Notre Dame, again, to renew that rivalry, keep the tradition alive. Let's just call it
go. Sorry.
Let's just call it a 12-year contract. You keep Michigan State on it every year. That's your one constant. And then every 2 years, you rotate who your home and home is. For 2 years, you got Purdue. And then for 2 years, you get Michigan. And they're already on the schedule for 2033 and 2034. And then one of them, you do something with, I guess, Wisconsin if you wanted to, or a Penn State if you wanted to. So it gives you the freedom to also play other teams throughout the conference and not just sticking in the, like, okay, you got Purdue, Michigan State bubble, but then outside of that, in 10 years, we play Michigan. But I think that would be beneficial. So have your baseline be Michigan State and then rotate who your opponents are, a rolling opponent every 2 years.
I like that. Would you like to go to 3 only if if USC bounces, or would you like to see them play 3 even if they keep USC? Because you'd have basically every year you're guaranteed now basically 10 games, because you have your 4 ACC games every year. You're going to have Clemson every year. You're going to have Navy every year. And now you're adding 3 Big Ten games. I'm not the greatest at math, but that's 4 plus USC plus Navy, 4 in the Big Ten. That would be, 3 in the Big Ten. That's 9, right? And then the years where you have a 5th ACC game, you're now to 10. So your minimum 9 games every year. Did I do the math correctly on that? So
yeah.
Minimum 4 ACC teams. You'd have minimum 3. If USC is off the schedule, that gives you 9 games. If USC stays on the schedule, it gives you 10, because you have 4 ACCs, you have Clemson, you'd have Navy, you had 3 Big Tens, that's 9, and then if you still have USC, that gives you 10. That gives you a little less flexibility for scheduling national games, which is a little bit of my hesitation to have a 3rd Big Ten game if you do keep USC. But what are your thoughts? Do you feel the same way, or would you like to see more of a Big Ten heavy schedule on your docket, even if USC is still part of it? What are your thoughts?
Because of what we talked about yesterday with the SEC and the perception that it brings to Notre Dame, I would rather that 3rd spot be like an SEC type of opponent. Or in your case that you talked about, the year that they have like Alabama and Texas and opponents like that, leave it up to if you do want to schedule a Central Michigan, or if you do want to schedule a Bowling Green. I don't know if I want that to be held down by Wisconsin. I don't know if I'd feel comfortable with that being held down by Nebraska or a Penn State. And so I would say if USC is off of the schedule, I'm comfortable with them having the 2 Big Ten slots. If USC is still on the schedule, I would say add another one and just keep it rolling, which, like we talked about earlier in the show, that's the majority of their years outside of 2029 where they have none, and 2032 where they have none, talking Big Ten opponents.
Yeah.
So
yeah, that's the interesting gauge, Trev, when you look at how to handle the Big Ten, because unlike the 80s and 90s when I was growing up, you didn't have the ACC on there regularly. You have teams that are now in the ACC on there regularly, but then you didn't. In 2000, Notre Dame started their season with Texas A&M, who was a Southwest Conference team. Actually, they were still Southwest Conference at the time. I don't think they went to the they were in the Big 12. Southwest Conference was dead. They were a Big 12 team. You played Nebraska was a Big 12 team, and you played Purdue, Big 10, Michigan State, Big 10, Stanford, Pac-12, Navy was independent, West Virginia was in the Big East, Air Force at the time was, I believe, a Mountain West team still. Boston College was in the ACC, Rutgers was in the Big East, and then USC in the Pac-12. So, you kind of had a flavor of all the leagues. My question is do you want to keep the Big Ten slate smaller so you can mix in some Big 12s and some more SECs, or do you say, hey, let's go heavy ACC Big Ten? I think that's an intriguing aspect to this for Notre Dame. And I'm working with the assumption that Notre Dame keeps USC on the schedule for now. If USC's off the schedule, I think that changes things a lot. I'm much more comfortable going to a 3rd Big Ten rotation. And if USC wants to be on it every now and then, I'd tell them to go pound sand. Like, I'd say we get nothing out of playing you twice every decade. If you want to be on this, then you're going to be on this. If not, then we're going to play teams that we don't have to fly thousands of miles to go play just for a couple games. We don't do that with anybody else. Why would we do that with you? So that would be, I'm getting to the point where I'm getting a little bit bitter about how USC is handling this one. And I'm almost to the point where I'm just like, screw them. Let them walk away from this and become less relevant than they already are. So my personal take is I don't know that there's a lot of value of playing Big 12 teams with any regularity. I've said before I would like to occasionally schedule a Big 12 team. I'd say like 4 every 10 to 12 years, simply for recruiting purposes. TCU, you come and play us in South Bend, we'll play you down in Arlington in Jerry World. You know, hey, Baylor, you come here for a home game, and then we'll go down and play you in Jerry World, or we'll play you in Phoenix, or we'll play you, you know what I mean? Something like that, where it's really more of a recruiting thing than it is, hey, we're playing the Big 12. How do we stack up against the Big? No, it's kind of like, no, it's the same reason we go play NC State. We want to get in front of all these Texas recruits. Like there's an element to your schedule that has to include that people don't put enough emphasis on. That's a big reason why Notre Dame kept that USC rivalry for so long, is and why they liked playing either Stanford or USC at the end of the year, because back then you'd hit the road right away. The players would fly home with support staff, and the coaches would immediately go on the road and hit the West Coast. You know, and it's a little different now, but like there was recruiting reasons why, on top of good football reasons, there's also recruiting value to that. That's really the only value that the Big 12 brings. I think every 10, 15 years having a home and home with Arizona or Arizona State is important now, as the state of Arizona becomes more impactful and has more talent. So that's the only reason I think the Big 12 is there. I'm not going to have a designated Big 12 slot every year. I do think there should be at least one designated SEC spot every year. But Big 12, I'm not sure I feel quite the same way.
Yeah,
what
we
are your
see
thoughts
that
on the Big 12?
No, we see that the same. It's just you start talking about your return on investment, getting out and playing Big 12 teams. And if the only benefit is just recruiting prowess out west or southwest or down south, even depending on the team that you're playing, Notre Dame is already starting to show that they have that. And I don't know how big of an impact they're going to have on recruits. Like, hey, did you see what we just did to TCU? It's like,
it's not about that, Trev. It's about them getting to see you, them getting to come watch you play. Like, sure. I've talked to recruits over the years that, like, yeah, first time I got to see Notre Dame play live is when, you know, I didn't have any interest in NC State, but they were begging me to come to a game. I wanted to see Notre Dame play.
Sure.
Like, that matters. And you can't assume that in 10 years you're going to have the same impact in Texas that you're having today. That's why it's about scheduling in a way that guarantees the fact that we're still getting in front of these kids and watch their, you know, where the local game on ABC, or where the game that they're going to, hey, I'm going to finally go visit Baylor. I'm not looking at Baylor. Like, I remember Troy Pride Jr. visited Clemson just to watch Notre Dame play. Well, he couldn't have done that if they're not playing those games. And so, like, just having talked to recruits, it does matter. Because they're like, hey, you know, my family gets to watch me play at least once a year. All my friends get to come watch me play at least once a year. Because if I go to Notre Dame, I'm going to get it back and come and play in front of my family and my friends. Not, I can't wait to go play Baylor or TCU. It's, sure, I get to go back home to play. And so it's not the specific team. It's more so, hey, we play everywhere, including your home state. And you don't have to always play Texas or Texas A&M to do that. That's kind of my thing. Is like, because if you're going to play in front of you, we want to play in Texas more often. Well, yeah, you've already got enough gauntlet games. You've already got Texas on your schedule a couple of times. It doesn't always have to be them or the Aggies, because then we get back to the whole thing is there's value to sometimes playing teams that you're likely going to beat. You can't have a schedule of 12 teams that are on your level. You're just not going to survive that type of season. And that's where I think the Big 12 could bring some value on top of getting in front of kids in Arizona, getting in front of kids in Texas. Does that make sense?
No, it does.
I don't view playing TCU alone as valuable, but I do think playing in front of kids with some level of frequency does matter.
I would rather that be worked into the ACC schedule, and then they just play SMU and have a rotating thing with them to get down to Texas. My moral of the story for me is, like, I just don't see the benefit of playing the Big 12 outside of recruiting. And I don't want to, like, say, oh, recruiting's not a big deal, but I think there's other ways to do that than designating a spot on your schedule, because then again, there's a finite amount of games that Notre Dame can play.
Yeah.
You can't keep all of your traditional rivalries and have this deal with the ACC and play Clemson and have 3 Big Ten slots, and they should probably get down to play the SEC, and they also shouldn't have 12 all P4 ranked regular season games. So there's going to have to be some mix of what you do, and the Big 12 for me is just the first one to go.
Just so we're clear, I did not say I want to play them every year. I said I don't see value in playing them like having a Big 12 slot. What I think is 4 games in a decade, I think is good. Get a home and a neutral site against TCU, and then in 4 years after that, you get a home, or 3, a couple years after that, you get a home and a neutral site against Arizona. We're going to play them where the Cardinals play. We're going to play Arizona where the Cardinals play. Like we're not going to Tempe. Oh, you're going to play us in front of where the Cardinals play, because then that kind of shows them, man, they're Notre Dame's big time. Like you don't even get to play them on your home stadium. Like it has an effect on recruits, and more often than not, those are going to be games where it's a quality opponent, but it's not like you're playing LaDainian Tomlinson's TCU. You do run the risk of some of those years where they're like that. But like there's teams like Kansas State's not on my radar for that type of game. I don't see any value in playing K-State, Iowa State, Kansas, Utah, Colorado. Because what value do you get by beating Colorado unless Deion's the coach? And even then, I don't know that does anything for you. Because it's like, is some kid from Texas going to care that you went out to Colorado and whooped Colorado? I don't think so. They're not going to care about you whooping TCU. They're just going to care about the fact that I get to go home and play in front of my home state. You hear kids talk about, one thing I love about the ACC schedule is I get to go back home and play in front of my, I'm going to play at least one game a year in either Virginia or North Carolina, almost every year. And I think that factors into it. And so but it's not an every year thing. Because to your point, you can't have it like where are your winnable games? Where's your MAC? You got to have a MAC team, or a team like that. You can't play 11 Power Fives in Navy every year, in my opinion. Like you just can. And you get to the point where, okay, you got a Big Ten slot, you got 3 Big Ten slots, you've got 4 to 5 ACC slots, you've got the Navy slot, you've got your SEC slot, you've got your Big 12 slot, and now you've got 12 games. And it's like, now Notre Dame fans are like, what? The same people that are like, stop playing Purdue are going to be like, why'd you schedule this, this hard of a schedule? But I do think there's value to occasionally doing it.
Sure.
And I don't know that the other option is you could say, hey, look, every couple of years we want to try to play a Shamrock Series game in either Phoenix or, one in San Antonio, one in Houston, one in Dallas. But I don't know if that's quite the same as playing a team from there. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah,
I'd be curious how that would be viewed by recruits, because that's the other alternative is, hey, we're going to play, we're going to talk to the ACC about redoing the schedule. Hey, get us more SMU on the schedule, and and talk to SMU about, hey, let's play this game in Arlington.
Yeah,
and something like that. But I don't know that SMU is going to carry the same weight as Texas and Texas A&M, but that's not the whole point. Neither does TCU or Baylor. It's about getting down there. So that's kind of, Texas Tech's not one of those teams because they're so far out of the way of everything. It's like it's TCU, Baylor, Houston, Arizona State. That's what it is for me.
One thing that they could do, too, is like to your point about the Shamrock Series, just every other year, the Shamrock Series is just against a Big 12 team, either in the Cardinal Stadium or in the Cowboy Stadium. And it's just a rolling Big 12 team every other year.
Yeah. I wouldn't mind seeing the Shamrock Series be a rotating game against the Power Five, the Power Fours. That's an interesting thought, Trev. Like in year one, it's the Big 10. In year 2, it's the Big 12, and maybe it's just a team. And then you rotate where you play it. 1 year you played in Kansas City, next year you played in Arlington, the next year you played in New Orleans or something like that. That wouldn't be a terrible idea. And Irish English said, what about playing in Arrowhead Stadium? I'm a fan of that. I've said that before. I'd love to play a game in Kansas City because you're not in St. Louis, but you're close enough to where you're kind of in that region. You're playing in the home of the Chiefs and all that other kind of stuff. I wouldn't mind. I wish St. Louis still had a pro football team. That'd be That'd be a place to go. The Rams were still there, or the Cardinals. Because when I was a kid, Trev, they were the Phoenix Cardinals. Then they moved to St. Louis, and they were the St. Louis Cardinals in football and baseball, which was weird. But yeah, very weird. But anyway, at the end of the day, Trev, the Big Ten needs to be more prominent on the schedule, in my opinion. I think we both agree on that. Here's the final question. This is the hot topic debate that we normally have, that people have. If you're going to talk about playing rivals, should you look to add Michigan on a regular basis?
Define regular. I mean,
like it used to be, like you've talked about, growing up every year, home and away against Michigan. Like you're either home or you're away against Michigan. Because like you said, when you grew up following Notre Dame up until 2015, they played almost every year. I think there was a couple years where they missed, but it wasn't many. I'm actually going to look that up, Trev, because you were born in 97, right?
Yep.
And so Notre Dame and Michigan, 97, 98, 99, they didn't play in 2000 and 2001, but then they played in 02, 03, 04, 05, 06, 07, 08, 09, 10, 11, 12, up until they ended the series in 14. So like your lifetime until you were in your almost 20, right, in high school, they played all but 2 years. They played they played Michigan. So that's what I like. It's
I get you.
It's basically it's every year.
I would, in the spirit of it being a limited amount of opponents that you can just fit on your schedule every year, especially if USC decides to play Notre Dame every year. I think 4-year blocks would be a healthy. Like you play them for 4 years, like home away, and then you have 4 years where you don't play them, and then it comes back again. Something to always look forward to, but. One of the biggest downsides for me is when after they lost to Michigan in 2019, I was sitting with one of my buddies who's a Michigan fan, and I was like, well, see you in 2033. See you in 14 years, unless they meet in the postseason. And so that's disappointing because that was a rivalry that I got to grow up with.
Mm-hmm.
And that was when I was like, I remember all the great games. The 05 game was awesome. The 06 game was not awesome. The 07 game was definitely not awesome. 08 was great, 135-17. We know what happened in the first game in 2011 under the lights in the big house. 2012 was a big implication game, and then they beat the brakes out of them in 2014. And so I would want some aspect of that back. But then it just comes down to, okay, you can't then play USC every year and Michigan State every year and Michigan every year and then try to find a way to get in Purdue. And because for how much of a storied program Notre Dame is, there's like 15 programs that there's arguments that should be on the schedule every single year. Fact of the matter is you get 12 regular season games. So
right.
I would go in a 4-year block window, like a rotating 4, so you already get them in 2033 and 2034. So what would 4 years behind that be? Also play them in 28 and 29 and whatever. So
here's my question, Trevor. USC, here's my follow-up to that. USC cancels the Notre Dame series. Do you try to replace them with Michigan permanently for 10 years?
If USC is not on the schedule, I would.
Okay.
That's personal preference. While you still maintain, then maybe Michigan in that scenario that I was talking about earlier, where Michigan State kind of becomes your foundation and then you play other teams in a 2-year rotating window. Maybe Michigan becomes that foundational team if you don't get USC every year. So that would be my own personal preference. But yeah, that's what I would do.
I've said it before, Trev, and this just comes down to your view of the rivalry and view of Michigan. I could not care less about playing Michigan. If they're good enough to be in the playoff and Notre Dame's good enough to be in the playoff, cool, they can play. It's a program I've never had respect for. It's a program whose fan base I despise. It's for football. It's funny because it's funny coming from me because I was a Michigan basketball fan since 1989 when I watched Glenn Rice and Ramil Robinson and Lloyd Vaught win the national championship up until the last 3 or 4 years, which I just kind of stopped watching college basketball. But I don't see the value in it that a lot of people do. I see the nostalgia of it, but I look at it and I say, that's a more recent rivalry because there's been a lot of good games in the last 20, 30 years. But Michigan's not even in the top 5 to 7 as far as like number of games that they've played. And when you look at the way that Michigan treated Notre Dame over the years, I mean, they've played 43, 44, 40. They've only played 45 times. There's teams they've played 70s, 80s, 90s. And the way that they have treated Notre Dame over the years, it's kind of like, I don't really want to like give that team the benefit of earning an opportunity to beat Notre Dame. Now, the counter is like my petty side is like, I'd like to play them enough to get the series lead back. But then I'm like, okay, but that's because they taught Notre Dame how to play. They love to say that, right? Well, as soon as Notre Dame got better than them, they stopped playing them. And then they didn't play from like 1908 to the 40s. And then they stopped playing them again until the 80s. And it's just kind of like, you complain about, nobody complains more about Notre Dame not being in the Big Ten than Michigan fans. And they're the reason that Notre Dame's not in the Big Ten. Like told that they're literally 100% of the reason. If Michigan didn't fight against Notre Dame being in the Big Ten, Notre Dame would have joined the Big Ten on 2 different occasions, including so far back before they were even known as the Big Ten. It was called the Western Conference. And so that's a big reason why I just don't care. But they played from 1887 to 1909, not every year, but and then Notre Dame beat them in 1909, and Michigan stopped playing them until 1942 and 43 because during the war, teams were looking for games. And then after that, they didn't play them again until 1978, and then they became a regular rival until Notre Dame ended the series in 2014. And I just don't have a lot of respect for Notre Dame, for Michigan, and I don't know that it brings a lot of value for Notre Dame. I think it's a lot more. It brings a lot more value for Michigan than it does Notre Dame from a perception standpoint, in my opinion. And the other question is would Michigan want that rivalry with already playing Ohio State every year, already playing Michigan State every year? I'd be curious if Michigan would even want that rivalry. But I like your note. I'd be okay if my settlement was okay. You play 4 and then you're off 4. You play 4. I wouldn't like advocate for that, but I wouldn't push back against that as hard as I would play them every year. That's kind of my thoughts on Michigan. I'd say if USC leaves, I'd say schedule Michigan State every year. That would be my takeaway. But I also understand why a lot, and it's not just a younger fan thing, Trev. There's a lot of people my age that want to play Michigan every year too, because there was just, they were almost always great games, and far more consistently competitive than Purdue or Michigan State. Certainly,
I think what makes this argument so interesting is I don't think that there's a wrong side. I guess if that makes sense. The point that you're making of, Michigan was the reason that Notre Dame was held out of the Big Ten, and their fans are disrespectful, and the program as a whole has been disrespectful to Notre Dame. I think at that fork in the road, people divide of what they want to do with the Michigan-Notre Dame rivalry. Yeah. There's people in the camp of, I just don't want anything to do with them. And I hear that. I get that completely. I am just in the camp of, okay, well, if you're going to be disrespectful, then I want to beat you on the football field. Then I want to play you every year. I don't like you. So if there's somebody that I don't like, I want to beat them even more than somebody who it'll be a good game like a Michigan State. But at the end of the game, you kind of tip your cap of hey, I respect you, you respect me. There's just something about good old-fashioned hate rivalries that I personally like. But if somebody's just hey, this program has disrespected us and their fans have been disrespectful to me, and I don't think they are a morally sound program, and I don't want anything to do with them, I also understand that too. I truly, I do. It's just a preference.
And it's partly why they wanted Notre Dame out of the Big Ten, more so than just the fact that they didn't want them in.
Sure.
And funny thing is, I'm not even Catholic. It's just I don't like bullies and I don't like bigots, and that's pretty much what Michigan was forever and still are. Not the bigot part. I'm talking about the bully part. They still are. They cheat. They think they can just bully the NCAA. They're just still that nasty program that just I have no respect for. How is what that Michigan program was that acted that way any different than the one now that cheated? And then they're going to fight, and act like total clowns in order to not, have to admit that they cheated.
Sure.
So that's the other part of it too, is like, they're not different than they used to be. They're the same program they've always been. And I dislike it. But I mean, there's a lot of Notre Dame fans that don't know that history. When we had Andrew McDonough publish that Big Ten, the series on Notre Dame in the Big Ten, there were people that are legitimately shocked. Like, I had no idea that this had to do with, like, that Notre Dame had chances to join the Big Ten, but Michigan blocked them. They had no idea. And so it adds an interesting element. So it also is the reason why I would say, you want to play Michigan, fine. Don't ever join the Big Ten as a full-time partner. However, it's the final piece, and we'll move on to our Big Ten talk, Trev. I do think that one of the benefits of establishing a more consistent relationship with the league is, if the ACC goes away, and I don't think that it will, but if it does, you have a league that you have a relationship with, that you could at least have a conversation about, hey, listen, we'll do with you guys what we did with the ACC. You already have our hockey team. That's been a great relationship. We'll bring all the other sports into the Big Ten, and then we'll play you minimum 4 games a year. If you want to go 5 games a year, and we'll replace the ACC with that. I'd be okay with that. I'd probably say 4 games a year. I think with them being a 9 conference game league, I don't know that 5 games a year would be necessarily make as much sense for their league. I'd go 4, and then you could say, okay, we'll go 4, but we want to play Michigan State every year, and then maybe you rotate Purdue and Michigan every 4, Trev, like something like that, and then you've got the 2 roaming, whatever the case may be. That's the one thing I wish. The one thing that I wish that Notre Dame would have done with the ACC is, I wish they would have done more to get the rivals on at least like one of the rivals on the schedule every year. And then maybe I want to see Pitt more. I want to see Boston College more, teams that Notre Dame has more history with in football, and obviously for other sports. That would be the thing. If you do go to the Big Ten, that would be the one thing I would demand. I don't know if the Big Ten would agree to that deal. And if they don't, people say, well, if the Big Ten doesn't take you, where are you going to go? The Big East. The Big East would gladly take Notre Dame's non-football sports. Gladly. And who's Notre Dame going to schedule? They're going to still schedule Pitt every year. They're going to schedule Boston College every year. They're going to schedule Syracuse every year. Those ACC teams that the Big East, the Big Ten, and the SEC don't want are going to play Notre Dame every year. So you still have that on your schedule. But that would be something I would like to see them do differently if they if they were to get that opportunity. I don't know that would happen, but it's something that I would consider, because you do have other options. People don't realize that the Big East is still a thing, and they would gladly take Notre Dame. So hopefully it doesn't come to that, because I don't want to see the ACC go away. But I watched the Big East Requiem the other day, one of the 30 for 30s, and you start to kind of get like, okay, yeah, the Big East, the ACC is not this great guy, this great league that's just done. I mean, they're the reason the Big East went away, because they poached all those Big East teams. And so it's like, yeah, it's kind of fair play here now that the Big Ten and the SEC are doing to you what you did to the Big East. So what comes around goes around when it comes to conference realignment a little bit.
I guess so.
Yeah. So, Trev, why don't you wrap up this section, and then we're going to jump into some conversation about the Big Ten next.
Yeah, absolutely. A lot of show left, guys. We are getting ready to preview the Big Ten Conference, and then after that, we're going to break down our predictions for how we believe the 2025 season is going to go for them. But you guys know what to do. There's 491 awesome people listening to us live, so be sure to hit that like button. Make sure you subscribe to this channel. But as always, the best way to support what we do here, subscribe to the premium message boards at boards.irishbreakdown.com. All right, Brian, it's time to start talking some Big Ten football. We are back here with another edition of the Irish Breakdown podcast, sponsored by FanDuel, brought to you by the Believe Network. And Brian, the Big Ten is interesting this year. Last year, when we previewed the SEC, we kind of talked about how Big Ten probably was the best conference in football last year. This year, they enter in. Now it's a question of, Are they top heavy? Are they a little bit more deep this year? What are we thinking about the Big Ten when we start to break this conference down?
I don't know what your opinion on this is, Trev, but here's mine. The Big Ten was the best league last year because they were the best team. They were the best league. They were the team that had the most title contenders at the top, in my opinion. And obviously the national champion came from there. Oregon was a really good team. Oregon's not a one and done in the playoff if they don't have to play Ohio State in the quarterfinals. I've said this before. I think there's only 2 teams in the quarterfinals, maybe 3, that beat Oregon. And it's Notre Dame, Texas, and Ohio State, obviously. I don't know that Georgia beats Oregon without Carson Beck and with the way that team was. I don't know that I think they would have had a similar problem to Notre Dame. They would have maybe scored a little bit more, but they were going to score. That secondary was going to struggle against Oregon. And then Penn State obviously is a semifinal team. And then you look at Ohio State wins a national championship. And then you look at some of the success they had in the bowl season. USC goes down and beats Texas A&M. Michigan goes and beats Alabama. And you say, okay, boy, yeah, the Big Ten had a pretty good postseason run. And the only disappointing Big Ten team was disappointing because they had to play another Big Ten team. And I think that kind of factors into it, Trev. But when you look at it, it's like last year, I do think the Big Ten was the best conference in college football. I think the SEC is going to have a big say in that this year. But here's the thing, Trev, in my opinion, I think the Big Ten is deeper this year. I don't know if it's going to be quite a strong 1-3. I think it'll be pretty good 1-2, 3 and 4 and 5. We'll see. But I think the middle of the Big Ten, which I thought was just kind of okay last year. I think the top 5 to 6 were pretty good. I think Illinois was a pretty good football team last year. They went and beat South Carolina in a bowl game. I forgot to even mention that one. That was another big Big Ten over SEC victory last year. I think the Big Ten also, Trevor, this year it's a better league. It's a deeper league. There's a lot of teams that are in the middle to bottom, not bottom, like the top 4 to 5 are pretty bad, but like right in the middle, like 5 to 12, it's a lot of good football teams, potentially good football teams in this league. And they are going to have a shot to say, hey, we're going to try to maintain supremacy of this conversation about what's the best conference college football. I think they have a shot to hold on to that title, which you and I believe they earned last season.
Yeah, you and I see that very similar. I mean, it comes down to the simple point of I think the teams that were at the top last year don't take as big of a step back as what some people think that they might. So that's one. Because, look, at the end of the day, conferences are always going to be judged by who their horses are. The people that get into the Big Ten versus SEC debate, you can talk all the live long day of who wins on a neutral field between Minnesota and Missouri. It's like, it doesn't matter at the end of the day. Like what people will pay attention to is the Ohio States, the Penn States, the Oregons, the Michigans versus the Alabamas and the Georgias and the Texases and the LSUs. And so with that being said, I think the teams at the top of the Big Ten, I don't have Oregon going 13-0 this year. They're also not going to be 8-4. You know what I mean? When I look at Ohio State, I don't have them winning the national championship this year, but they're also not going to miss the playoffs, And then on the flip side, when you start looking at the middle tier teams, there are a handful of teams that are poised for better seasons in conference and out of conference schedule as a whole to just be better overall teams. I'm not banking on USC blowing 5 fourth quarter leads this upcoming fall.
Right.
You know what I'm not banking on that. I think that teams like Nebraska could be improved from last year. There's varying degrees of how we see improved, which we'll get into later, but I think they're going to be improved. I think Washington's going to be improved. Teams that were lower middle of the conference this year have the discussion to be in that 5 to 8 range, arguably down to 9. It's weird to think that it's not weird. It's annoying to think that middle of the road in the conference gets you all the way down to 12th. But when you have a league with 18 teams in it, I guess the 12th slot is kind of lower middle of the pack. But overall, I think that the middle tier teams combined with the top of the league not taking this gigantic step back like we've seen in other leagues.
Right.
I
Because
think
then you're
that's
the
what
Big
makes
12.
this- exactly.
Then you're the Big 12, Trev. Hey, we're a deep league. We got 9, 10 teams that could win the league, but none of them are title contenders.
Yes,
Like
you're.
to the what? Go ahead.
I was going to say you're either the Big 12 or what the ACC was when Clemson stopped being Clemson. It's like, yeah, you kind of have the
Right.
big name at the top with Clemson, but it's like, okay, who steps up? Florida State, Miami, Louisville, Georgia
Right.
Tech. Like, yeah.
Right. And when Clemson and Florida State are both taking steps back, then your league's in trouble.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why the ACC right now is the in my opinion the worst Power 4 league of the 4. I would argue that the top 2 to 3 teams in the ACC are better than the top 2 to 3 teams in the Big 12, and I don't know that it's overly close. But after that, I'll take teams 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 in the Big 12 right now over teams 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 in the ACC. And right now, I think the thing that's going to help the SEC this year is I think their top teams are going to be better. And then, but more importantly, it's 4 to 12 is going to look like a what's perceived as a vintage SEC season. But I don't think the Big Ten is, like, to your point, Trevor, I don't think this is a step back year for the Big Ten as a whole. Maybe it's a step back year in that they don't have a dominant team unless Ohio State can completely reload coaching-wise and player-wise, which they're capable of, Trev. Or James Franklin finally learns how to coach in a big game. Like there's rosters that are capable of it. I'm saying there's a chance that the Big Ten doesn't have that dominant team like Ohio State was in the playoffs last year. Or like Michigan was the year before. Again, granted, it was against a weak schedule, but they went in the postseason and beat Alabama and beat Washington, who were the 2 best teams in college football last year other than them. I know a lot of people say, no, what about Georgia? That got proven. Georgia's weak schedule got proven to be a thing when we watched them play against Alabama in the SEC title game. Doesn't mean Georgia wasn't great. They were probably the 4th or 5th best team that year, but they shouldn't have been in the playoff, in my opinion. Michigan beat both of those teams and proved that they were a dominant team. 2021 Michigan was pretty good. The problem that they had that year is they had to go against 2021 Georgia, who just was heads and shoulders above everybody else that season, in my opinion. Except maybe Bama. That's, I still say, how does Bama look if they don't lose John Mechie and Jamison Williams by the end of the second quarter of the title game? But whatever. So that's what when I look at the Big Ten, Trev, that's what intrigues me about the league this year. It's not so much where's Ohio State going to be, where is Penn State going to be, where's Oregon going to be. I mean, those teams are still going to be really good. What excites me about the Big Ten this year, and we were talking about it during our show, this is the hardest league to predict for 2 reasons. Number one is I think the Big Ten did a much better job this year than I think the SEC did of balancing schedules. There's a couple teams that have really tough schedules, but there's not a lot of teams. There's a couple, but there's not as many teams in the Big Ten that I look at and say, that's a weak schedule. But that could also be partly because of so many teams that I think I think Michigan State's going to be better. I think Minnesota's going to be better. I think Michigan's going to be better. I think USC's going to be better. I think UCLA is going to be better. I think Illinois is going to be pretty good. I think Nebraska's going to be better. Indiana's going to take a step back, but they're still going to be really good. And I think Iowa's going to be better. That's what I'm intrigued by with the Big Ten this year is I just think it's overall an ascension of teams in the league. And even the teams that stink, maybe other than Maryland, I think are probably going to be better than they were last year. They're still going to be pretty bad, though. There's really only one team in the Big Ten that I see taking a big step back, and we'll get into that when we do our predictions. But other than that, that's what entertains me about the Big Ten this season. And then the other thing, too, Trev, is we get into our, kind of transitioning into our superlative predictions, which we always do at the beginning of the show. The other interesting part about it is there's a lot of players in the Big Ten that I look at and say, these guys are up for consideration for being the best in college football at what they do. I mean, you could argue that at minimum, the Big Ten has 2 of the 5 best players in college football this year, at minimum. They happen to both play for the same team, but they're still the Big Ten. But they're not alone. Like Penn State's got a couple guys that are in conversation for some of the best in college football. Oregon's got some guys who are in that conversation for top players of their position in college football, and those teams aren't alone. So I think that's what has me kind of saying this is why I think this league is going to be better, because there's star power in the league outside of just Ohio State, and I'm looking forward to watching it, to be honest with you. And that's why, another reason I'm looking forward to the season, Trevor's. I look at the SEC and I'm like, dude, there's a lot of good teams in the league this year. This is going to be a fun year. I look at the Big 12. I think the same thing. I look at the Big 10 and I think the same thing. And I'm like, dude, there could be a year some teams that just step up and they just dominate. But we could see multiple. It would not shock me, Trevor, if a top 4 seed this year has 2 losses, and not, you know what I mean? Like multiple top 4 seeds have 2 losses.
Wouldn't surprise me.
I can see that.
Yeah, I mean,
I can see that.
The thing that I appreciate about the Big Ten's conference schedule, before we dive into superlatives here, is unlike the SEC, a lot of their top teams play each other. Ohio State plays Penn State, and Penn State plays Oregon and Ohio State, and you got USC playing Michigan, and they're traveling to all these different places. That's what I appreciate. The SEC, even though they have on paper 2 less teams than what the Big Ten has, Texas's schedule kind of looks a heck of a lot different than Georgia's schedule, but those are 2 of the top teams in the league.
And especially LSU's schedule.
Yes, looks significantly different. But, we're talking about a conference where, Penn State, and they're at Ohio State. They are, against Michigan State on the road, 2 teams that we think could be improved. So it's all interesting to keep track of. But that's one thing that I like about the Big Ten.
The complaint I have with Penn State's schedule is more about who Penn State chose to play outside of their league than it is about their Big Ten schedule. I don't think their Big Ten schedule is a gauntlet by any stretch, but to your point, they still got to play arguably the 2 best teams in the league besides themselves, one at home, one on the road. I won't say necessarily who it is, but if you look at my Big Ten predictions, and if I'm right on my Big Ten predictions, the Big Ten is going to have to play. Penn State's going to have to play, I think, 3 of the top 5 teams in the league, not including themselves. But after that, okay, there's a drop off after that. But those 3 games are still all losable, which makes it a challenging schedule. I think Michigan has a softer conference schedule than Penn State, but then they went and played Oklahoma on the road, which adds value to their overall schedule. So that's what I think. And I think you give credit to them because, like you said, Trev, they do have 2 more teams in the league, which makes it harder to find some balance in the league. And I think they did a pretty good job of that. And I'm actually realizing this, Trevor, so I'm going to have to go through and make some corrections because I forgot to, on our cards, change SEC from Big Ten to Big Ten. So I got to go edit that and fix all those cards because they all say SEC. But I'll go ahead and do that while we're kind of talking about this next part of our show.
Yeah, well, while you're doing that, I'll get us kicked off with the superlatives. And if you guys aren't, yeah, I got you, man. I got you.
You seem like,
yeah.
Keep going.
And the superlatives are, by Webster's definition. No,
yes.
So
the 7th runner-up to Player of the Year is
the 34th best offensive player of the year in the Big Ten.
Let's just randomly rank the top 18 offensive lines in the Big Ten, Trev, just while I finish this corrections of the stupid thing that I did.
Oh,
anyway,
man.
Go ahead.
Well, when we get into superlatives, we've done it for the other 2 conferences we previewed already, and we're going through Offensive Player of the Year, Defensive Player of the Year, Rookie of the Year, and then Coach of the Year for every single conference. We always get started off on the offensive side of the ball. Now, Archer, I've seen you popping in and out of the chat, and let me tell you this right now. Ohio State easily could have cleared all 3 of these, all 3 of the players of the year, honestly. Getting us started out for the Offensive Player of the Year, I have Jeremiah Smith. I think he's the best wide receiver in college football, and I don't really know if there's an argument there. So it was an easy choice for me when I start talking about who the best player within the conference is going to be. And so he is somebody that going into his true sophomore season, I think he's going to have more consistent production. I don't see him having a lapse of what happened against Texas in the playoff game, because I think he's also going to be helped out a little bit by having a better tight end in Max Clare. Carnell Tate is going to be a big part of this offense. And so I have far and away Jeremiah. Well, not far and away, but I have Jeremiah Smith being the best player in the league offensively.
And I think the thing about Ohio State that I like is if you do want to just come say, hey, we're just not going to let him beat us. We're just not going to happen. We're just not going to let him beat us this year. They have, because those other pickups, they're going to hurt you bad, which then makes it harder for you to say, we're just going to spend the whole game stopping us. And not a lot of teams had Texas's talent in the secondary last year where they could slow down the other guys the way that they did in that game. But yeah, I'm with you, Trev. I don't need to add a whole lot more to it. I think that's where I'm at. Jeremiah Smith is my pick for Offensive Player of the Year. I want to ask this question: if it's not him, because like honestly, this is the one thing I spent the least amount of time on was Offensive Player of the Year. If it's not him, who does it go to in your opinion? That's a little bit of a tougher one.
Yeah, it is. I mean, off rip, because I'm with you. I was like Big Ten Offensive Player of the Year, Jeremiah Smith next.
Yeah.
But if I'm breaking it down off the top of my head, I immediately jump to one of the Penn State backs, probably Nicholas Singleton for his receiving ability. So Nicholas Singleton would be at the top of that conversation for me. Probably. I'm trying to think of quarterback playing the Big Ten, and quarterback playing the Big Ten this year is just going to be so interesting.
Yes, because it's a lot of they're the opposite of a lot of other people. There's not as much proven quarterback production. There's a lot of transfers in. Here's a guy that if they finally arrive and have the breakout season, I could see a guy like Dylan Raiola is a driver of that and has a big year, and he's a guy that's in that conversation a little bit as well.
Yeah.
I'm not predicting it, but I'm saying like I could see something like that. I could see like a DeMond Williams having a monster year for Washington, and kind of because he's not getting the hype. Because my fear with Jeremiah Smith when it comes to how he's perceived by the media, which is one of the entities that votes for the award, they have a Big Ten media and a Big Ten coaches, awards, is do they pick Jeremiah Smith apart and criticize every aspect of it, and then some guy that wasn't on people's radar has a big year and they give him all that love. So like those are a couple guys that I could see having that type of season for the Big Ten this year offensively.
One last offensive dark horse I thought of was Jonah Coleman, the running back for Washington.
Yeah.
I could see him kind of doing something like what Dylan Sampson did last year in the SEC. Dylan Sampson was the offensive player of the year last year in the SEC. Not a whole lot of people know about it because they had, Ryan Williams and Jalen Milroe went on the run that he had and things like that. So maybe the running back from Washington, but the number 2 spot in the Big Ten for offensive player of the year is a much more intriguing conversation than number 1. That's for sure.
I do agree with you on Singleton. I do think this season we're going to see Singleton, if he can stay healthy, that's the big thing for him, be more of the guy for Penn State. Katron Allen's a good back. I thought he had to be more of the guy last year than he should have been because of Jonathan or Nicholas Singleton being banged up at times last season. And Katron was banged up a little bit at times too. So that's where I'm at on those guys. So let's go Defensive Player of the Year, Trevor.
To Archer's dismay, I know I easily could have went with Caleb Downs, but we'll get into why I didn't when we bring up my Rookie of the Year in the Big Ten. But I'm going with Coy Perch, the safety from Minnesota. And I really like him. I think that he could have I guess you could say the Cooper DeJean effect at Iowa when he was like their secondary was just kind of okay, but he kind of highlighted everything. I'll get into more about that when we break down Minnesota individually, but he is by far going to be the standout on that defense. Last season he had 46 total tackles. He had 5 interceptions. He had 2 passes defended, finished the year with 3.5 interceptions and didn't even play the entire season. So health will kind of come down to a question, but if he has the year that he's capable of, he's going to be far and away their best player on defense, arguably the best player on their team. So I pick Coy Perch for defense. So
I am going with Caleb Downs. Look, there's other players that are going to be good players this year. I think Denai Dennis Sutton has a chance to have a monster season and he could get some love. Coy Perch is a very good player. Maybe Derek Moore has a big breakout year at Michigan this season. When it comes down to it, though, I just think he's just the best player on defense. He's the most talented player. I think the way that the only hesitation I had, to be honest with you, Trevor, is I just don't know how they're going to use him with the new defensive coordinator. This would be an even easier decision for me if I knew they were still going to have run some of the basically that if Jim Knowles was still the defensive coordinator, it'd be no question. I mean, last year he had 82 tackles, he had 7.5 tackles for loss, 2 interceptions, 6 pass breakups, returned a punt for a touchdown. I just think he's the best defensive player in the league. I don't think it's a no-brainer that he wins it because a lot of times it's a statistical award. It's not just who's the best player. And there could be a scenario where if they don't use him to be around the ball as much, and again, I haven't been at practices, I haven't really read anything on Ohio State, so we'll see how that goes, but I just have a hard time thinking that a guy like Matt Patricia is dumb enough to not design game plans to have Caleb Downs near the football as much as possible. And barring injury, I just think he's the best defensive player, and I don't know that it's overly close in the sport, but I think there's a lot of good defensive players in the Big Ten this year. There's some really good players, and let's see who ends up being that guy. It's a good year at safety. You went with Coy Perch. I went with Caleb Downs. Dylan Dynaman's a good football player. I still think he's a little overhyped. He's like first team All-American and all that kind of stuff. I wouldn't even have him preseason first team All Big Ten, much less first team preseason All-American. But, hey, there you go. So I'm going Caleb Downs as my defensive player of the year.
I don't blame you at all. I get it. I really do. But one of the reasons why is –
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, I was going to say one of the reasons why is because my rookie of the year is also from Ohio State. And while they very well could have the best offensive, best defensive, and in my eyes, the best rookie of the year, wanted to kind of throw a little wild card in there. But I didn't think it was crazy wild with it being Coy Perch. But – rookie of the year, I'm going back to Ohio State, and I think it's going to be Devin Sanchez, one of the corners there. I think he is really good, man. I mean, we're talking about a long athlete. He's 6'2", he's 198 pounds, former 5-star. He was rated the #1 cornerback in the country by several different outlets. And I think Ohio State's going to rotate their corners a little bit more this year. Davison Igbinosun comes back, the holding king, and we'll see if he's able to clean up some things fundamentally.
I wasn't expecting that. It's so true.
We'll see if he's able to clean up some things fundamentally. And I do like what Jermaine Matthews presents to the defense as well. But Devin Sanchez is the type of player where either one of Jermaine Matthews or Davison Igbinosun can't take their foot off the gas. That's the type of player that Devin Sanchez is to me. Long athlete. He's built very similar to Leonard Moore when I look at their frames. It's a little bit thicker than where Leonard Moore was last year, but not by a whole lot. So my go-to pick is Devin Sanchez for rookie of the year.
Unfortunately, the entire time you're talking, all I'm hearing in my head is the holding king to the sound of Dancing Queen by ABBA. That's just what's going through my head the entire time. It's like an old, In Living Color or Mad TV parody of Dancing Queen, and it's Holding King, and it's Davison Igbinosun. So I didn't hear anything you just said, Trevor. I've just got that song playing in my head with Holding King the whole time. No, I heard what you said. It's a good. I think Devin Sanchez is a very good player. I think it's DeCorian Moore. I'm going with DeCorian Moore from Oregon. I think especially with Evan Stewart going down, he's going to get targeted a lot more. Did a little research before the show. It sounds like he's having a really good fall camp. You lose Tez Johnson. Evan Stewart gets hurt over the summer. Somebody's got to step up. And I think the most talented receiver on the roster, he's not, obviously there's other guys with more experience, but he's a guy that's going to play. He had a little bit of got a little dinged up early in fall camp. He's fine. He's practicing. He's getting a lot of buzz, but I think he's a guy that is, as long as he can continue to stay healthy, is going to put up big numbers in an offense that is going to be really good. Bobby O'Shea trying to get me. He says, Brian, sing a few bars. I can't recollect that song. that ain't happening, because you still wouldn't recognize that song if you heard me singing it. It still would be like, no, I don't hear it. And I know you know what I'm talking about. You're just trying to get me to embarrass myself and sing in front of people. But well played. Hey, I respect the attempt. I respect the hustle, Bobby O'Shea. But I think the Corey Moore is going to have a monster year. There's a couple other. There's some good. I mean, you could have gone Bryce Underwood. I think would have been an easy pick, but I don't know that he's going to start all year. We'll see. If he starts game one, my answer might change a little bit, and I might have to think about Bryce Underwood. But I just really think that Corey Moore is going to have a big year, and you're not going to have to ask him to carry the team the way that you're going to need Bryce Underwood to carry the offense for Michigan. I still have questions about their O-line and skill players around him. He may be the most talented freshman. You could argue for that, but is he going to be able to produce enough to have the production needed? And just a reminder, this is top rookie, freshman or redshirt freshman. It's not transfers. Those are newcomers. They're not rookies. So rookie of the year is what this award is. And that's why I'm going with the Corey Moore. So that's where I'm at. Let's go coach of the year, Trev. This is one where I'm just going to let you say it, man, so you can get the booze in the chat. Go for it. Hey, brace yourselves, y'all. Brace yourselves. Just know he's still our guy. We still love Trev. He's done a great job here at IB. But I called him this morning and I said, man, I've never been more disappointed to you in my life with this pick. But I'll let y'all know he's just as disappointed himself. But this is why y'all love IB, because we're still going to give you honest takes. So go ahead and say it. Go ahead and say it.
It's my coach of the year in the Big Ten's Lincoln Riley. I'm sorry. And thank you for coming here on the Irish Breakdown podcast. Be sure to hit that like and hit that subscribe button. No, so here's my rationale. Here's my rationale. Look, I think that oh no. I've lost all my credibility. I'm gonna have to build it back up from oh no.
But you know what I love about it though, Trev?
I saw that going through.
He's going to explain himself in a second, but this is the thing though, guys, is like, we're Notre Dame fans, but we're going to give you guys our honest takes and our honest evaluations. And trust me, I know I heard the pain in his voice when I called him this morning about it. I heard the pain in his voice, but continue explaining why he's your pick. The chat is killing me right now. I set you up so bad for that, Trev. I'm sorry. I had to do it.
No, it's okay.
I had to do it.
It's okay. Believe me when I say I went through every option before we got here. But look, you guys are going to understand it when we start breaking down the conference. I'm high on USC this year, and I think they're due for a bounce back. And so I started thinking about the other potential coaches of the year. James Franklin repeating going 8-1 in conference is not going to be worthy of a coach of the year. Ryan Day getting one win better, but after coming off of a national championship, I don't know if it's going to be enough. So then I started thinking about Brett Bielema at Illinois. Getting a one-game improvement in conference, I don't know if that's enough to be considered coach of the year. So I went with USC. Argument could also be made for the head coach at Washington. But I think that Lincoln Riley is going to be able to turn this program around. And I think it's going to be looked at in an even bigger light because of his almost like dissension over the last couple seasons. You come in, you go 11-2, then you go 8-5. Last year, you're 7-6. If he's able to turn that around and become, I don't know, a title contender in the Big Ten, but a team that you don't want to face in the Big Ten, I think that's going to speak volumes for him. And so that's why I went, unfortunately, with Lincoln Riley. But you guys got to believe me, I went through every single option. I was sitting there and thinking about, is there a way that Barry Odom can do it? Is there a way that? But that's where I got to. So I'm sticking with my guns, unfortunately.
Okay, so I brought in some razzing for you, but if we're looking at this objectively, if USC has the kind of bounce back where they went 7-6 last year. Let's say they're a similar team this year, but half of those games, they now make that final play. They make that fourth down stop against Michigan. They make that fourth quarter stop against Minnesota. They make that, fourth quarter stop against Penn State to win a big game like that. You're talking about a 9-3 football team. and still losing Notre Dame. Now you're talking about a 7-2 team in league. That's going to get you some nominations for Coach of the Year, Trevor. There's no question about it. So my only pushback to you is I don't think they're going to finish as high as you do, which we'll get into. But if you are correct in your prediction, so it's about following consistency with what your prediction is. And you've said for a while, you think USC is going to be a lot better team this year. If your prediction is correct, I absolutely think Lincoln Riley is going to be in the conversation for Coach of the Year. I absolutely think so. So that'll be kind of where we are when we make the predictions as we go through the predictions. But I actually kind of pulled one a little bit out of left field, Trev, and I didn't tell you before the show who my pick was because I wanted to kind of see your reaction to it. But I thought about a lot of different guys. I thought about Ryan Day because my thought is if they do get one game better with everything they lost last year and they dominate the Big Ten, I could see them, Ryan Day getting it. You can make a similar argument if Oregon wins the Big Ten again with all the losses they had. Does Dan Lanning get some consideration? If James Franklin can win the Big Ten this year, he'll get consideration. I think Brett Bielema is a guy on my radar this season. I liked your Jed Fish, potential. If they can have a big season, I have them being very good. He was on my radar. I think Matt Rule is on my radar as a guy that could kind of, for the same reasons you talked about USC, I apply to Matt Rule and Jed Fish. But I'm going with Kirk Ferentz. I think I really like this Iowa team, Trev. I think that they've got a schedule that sets up for them to have a good record, but also some challenging games that's going to give them a chance to pull off a couple upsets. I have them pulling off a couple upsets, which gets him a lot of love. And I have them as a team that we could be going into November talking about, could Iowa be a playoff team? And a lot of it's going to come down to, can they beat Iowa State in week 2? So that way they have a clean non-conference record. That's not going to be easy. But if they can win that game, then I could see them being a playoff contender. But at the very least, I think they're a contender for the big going into November with a shot of, if they can do this and this, Iowa could sneak into the Big Ten title game. And that's why I have expectations, or I have Kirk Ferentz predicted to be my conference coach of the Big Ten Conference Coach of the Year this season. So, Trev, before we get onto the predictions, I do want to bring up the perception of the league, who people believe the top teams are. We do have the FanDuel best odds to win the Big Ten, and FanDuel has Ohio State at plus 185, Penn State at plus 230, Oregon at plus 360, Michigan at plus 1,000, USC at plus 2,000, and Iowa at plus 3,400. I have to say, it continues what we've seen a lot of this offseason, Trevor, is there's a lot of people that view Michigan's 2024 season as just a fluky, quarterback stinks, flash in the pan type of season, and they're just assuming Michigan is going to bounce back. I'm a little surprised by that, I'll be honest.
Yeah, I think a lot of people are putting a lot of weight into how they ended their season. Beating Ohio State and Columbus and then beating Alabama in a bowl game, that just goes to show you you beat the national champs and then you beat Alabama in the SEC. Never mind the fact that they lost to a bad Oklahoma team in Norman 24-3. It's just on paper, you see Michigan beats Alabama and they beat Ohio State, and then they come back into this year and they get a big quarterback recruit in Bryce Underwood. And I think that's where a lot of the focus comes in. And I do think that there is still some remnants of, this is a program that won a national championship, 2 years ago. Never mind the fact that almost every single player from that roster is gone. And the coaching staff, and every coach except for one is gone. Right. Yeah. But I think that's where they pick up a lot of it. So I thought that was interesting. But, above all, I mean, I'm pretty in line with what FanDuel thinks about some of these odds. So I think this is a pretty spot on odds list.
There's a very clear delineation, as we see here, from the top 3 and everybody else, which does track, in my opinion, with where the league is headed this year. I do think there's still, I think the top 3 come back down a little closer to the rest of the league. Partly it's minor regression because of just Ohio State and Oregon lost a ton off their teams last year, a ton. And Penn State didn't lose a ton volume-wise, but the two that they did lose were huge losses. Two of the, I would say, 5 to 6 best players in college football last year were played for Penn State last season in Tyler Warren and Abdul Carter. So I think, a little bit there, but I also think a lot of it just has to do with, as we mentioned, I'll just give you all a little hint. I don't have Michigan 4th in the Big Ten, and I don't have USC 5th. I think absolutely both of those teams are going to be better than they were last year. May not be record-wise necessarily, Trev, but just how they play. In the not being better record-wise is more about the overall league getting better and their schedules than it is about necessarily they're not any better. Your record is what you are, but your record doesn't always define how good you are, relative to maybe if you had somebody else's schedule. And that's an interesting piece of this. So that's the FanDuel odds, Trev, for the Big Ten. That's our superlatives for the Big Ten. And that gives us a little bit of a glimpse into just our overall general thoughts about the Big Ten before we unveil our picks.
Listen, folks, don't go anywhere. We are still going to talk about where we see every Big Ten team falling. But before we get there, be sure to hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, hit that notification bell. Whatever streaming platform you listen to us on, we would greatly appreciate a 5-star review. But as always, the best way to support what we do here, subscribe to the premium message boards at boards.irishbreakdown.com. Brian, it is time to break down the Big Ten Conference. And you guys know how we do it here. First of all, disclaimer, because we got this question yesterday. Tuesday, when we broke down the SEC. These are not power rankings. Mm-hmm. These are how we see the rankings at the end of the year playing out based on what their conference record is. So there are times where somebody's record may look better or worse, or their ranking may look better or worse depending on the schedule that they play, but it is not our reflection of how good we think this team actually is. Some people are just victims to their own schedule, unfortunately. But we broke it down. Since this is a conference with 18 teams in it, we broke it down into sections of 4. So we have 4 sections of 4. Then, like we've done consistently, we'll reveal our last 2 who we believe is going to be playing in the conference championship. And so that's how we have this broken down today, Brian. I'm ready to dive into it.
I am, and obviously we went through the FanDuel rankings of where the league is, and I'll say as I kind of look through it, I mean, I think the top 3 is my top 3. After the top 3, Trevor, I had a hard time getting from 4 to probably 12. That's what I like about the league this year is that 4 to 12 is really quality. And as we mentioned before, the schedules are set up to where you're going to have to prove yourself this year in the Big Ten. There aren't a lot of easy roads. There's a couple easier roads, but there's no easy roads. Like I think Michigan has probably one of the more favorable schedules in the Big Ten. Would you agree with that? Like compared to other teams, like they're in the top 3 to 4 as far as like it's not a gauntlet of a schedule. They still have to play at Nebraska, at USC, at Michigan State. They've got to play Ohio State at home. They've got to play Washington at home, and they got to play Wisconsin at home. And then the non-conference will play at Oklahoma, which doesn't factor into these rankings. These are Big Ten rankings. These aren't where they will be in the college football playoff rankings because, some team may have the same record as you in conference, but this other team lost at a conference, and so they're not ranked as high. So keep that in mind. But even then, like you say, Trev, that's not a cakewalk. That's not – I mean, there's a couple SEC teams that would look at that schedule like, no thanks, we don't want any part of that. We're going to take what we have because we don't have to play Texas, Alabama, Georgia, or LSU this year, They still have to play Ohio State. They still have to play at USC. They still have to play at Nebraska. And part of the challenge is it gets easier if we're wrong about a couple of these teams. If I'm wrong about Nebraska being better, if you're wrong about USC being better, well, actually, we both think the USC is going to be better. Just to the degree that you think USC is going to be better, then okay, maybe then it doesn't look as tough. But it's overall, I think the schedules were built well for the Big Ten this year. So let's dive into it, Trev, and we'll pull our rankings up here, and we'll begin with my bottom of the Big Ten. I've said a lot of favorable things about the Big Ten schedules this year, Trev, and and the Big Ten is a league and how good it is but the bottom of the Big Ten is really rough, in my opinion. And in my opinion, the bottom of the Big Ten is worse than the bottom of the SEC. And I would argue that the bottom of the Big Ten is as bad or not worse than the bottom of the ACC. They might have the worst bottom 2 or 3 teams in all of college football amongst the power leagues. I really believe that. That's not indicative of how good the rest of the league is. I have Maryland. Trevor, they lost a ton from last year's team, and they weren't even that good last year. I think Mike Loxley's time there is coming to an end. They don't have a good roster. Their starting quarterback left to transfer to another school. I don't think the transfer pickups that they got are going to really do a lot for them. I think this is going to be a really rough year for Maryland, and they're, to me, the team that finishes at the bottom. They're going to have a tough time when you look at their schedule, Trev. I really think Maryland's going to could have a tough time winning a game this year, because when you look at their home games, they've got Washington, Nebraska, Indiana, Michigan, and then they play Michigan State on a neutral field. Their road games are at Wisconsin, at UCLA, at Rutgers, at Illinois. For a team like Maryland, that's a gauntlet. It's not a gauntlet for Ohio State, but for Maryland, it is, because I don't know that they're going to have a good enough roster to really beat any of those teams. It's possible in today's era of college football, but it's going to be tough for them to win any of those games, and that's why I've got the Terps at the bottom of my Big Ten rankings. Purdue is next. Everything I just said about Maryland, you could say about Purdue. They weren't very good last year. They were even worse than Maryland. I just think they brought in more transfer portal pickups that I think can be impactful. I think they're going to be better at quarterback, and I think they're going to have a culture change at Purdue this season. That's going to at least make them a little bit more competitive in the league, but they're still not going to be very good. Number 16 is the Northwestern Wildcats. They were a great story 2 years ago when the head coach took over and had to replace, obviously, Pat Fitzgerald, who got fired, and they overachieved, and it was a great story. And I think last year they came back down to earth a little bit. They were 4-8 last season, but they had some competitive games, lost a close game to Duke. And Illinois, they battled for a little bit, but for the most part, Trev, they got beat soundly most of last season. They got beat by 19 at Washington. Indiana beat them by 17. They lost by 20 at home to Wisconsin. They lost by 26 to Iowa. They gave up 40 points to Iowa, Trev. They got beat 31-7 by Ohio State at home in a game where Ohio State played terrible and still beat them by 24. And then Michigan beat them by 44 points, and then Illinois beat them by 10 at home. I just don't think they were very good last year. I don't think their roster is very good. I think they're going – and they're basically rebuilt their offense through the portal. I do like Preston Stone at quarterback. He was at SMU a couple years ago. But overall, I don't think this team's going to be very good. And number 15 for me is Rutgers. Rutgers is a team, Trev, that I think has a better roster than the 15th best team in the Big Ten. The problem for Rutgers is I think they have a brutal schedule. They have to play Iowa, at Minnesota, at Washington, home against Oregon, at Purdue, at Illinois, home against Maryland, at Ohio State, home against Penn State. Talk about a brutal schedule. They literally play – well, I shouldn't say this because I'll give it away. But they play arguably the 4 best teams in the Big Ten, if not the 5 best teams in the Big Ten. You could definitely say comfortably 5 of the 7 or 8 best teams in the Big Ten, they have to play. I think it's going to be a rough year for Rutgers, win-loss wise, and there's a big difference between them as a program and these teams below them. It's really schedule related for me, and he just look. I like the job Coach Schiano's doing there, Trev, but he's going to have to figure out his quarterback answers, and I know you'll have more to talk about that about Rutgers when we get there, but they haven't been able to fix their quarterback problem, and until he can actually recruit and develop a quarterback, they're going to struggle to be any better than they were last year. And I think last year was a team that was solid, but you lost a decent amount from it, and your schedule this year is really rough.
Getting into the bottom of my conference rankings at number 18, I'm following suit with Brian. I have Maryland for a host of different reasons. I fall in line with everything that he said. I mean, honestly, if you look at their schedule, it's somewhat favorable. They don't have Ohio State, they don't have Penn State, they don't have USC, and they don't have Oregon. So I'm sure the question is, Trev, why do you have them finishing at the bottom of the league? They still have to play Washington, still have to play Indiana, on the road against Illinois, Michigan, and Michigan State. 1. 2, to your point about outgoing transfers, Brian, they had 32 players leave their team in the portal, and they only brought in 16. They only returned 3 starters on offense. And to continue with the offensive woes, it sounds like from everything that I've read, they're going to be rotating their quarterbacks between Justin Martin and Malik Washington, the true freshman. And from everything that we've seen, quarterback rotations don't really work out like that. That's not a let's start the older guy and wait for the younger guy to develop. That is quite literally what Maryland is doing. What they're doing is, I guess we'll just see who can make plays for us this drive. Let's see what happens. Unfortunately for them, it doesn't get much better on the other side of the ball. They have a new defensive coordinator, Ted Masciano, and then they lost all 4 starters along their defensive line. That compounded with their schedule that does still consist of Washington, Indiana, Illinois, Michigan, and Michigan State. I have the Terps having a rough year. That one's going to be unfortunate for them. My 17th ranked team is the UCLA Bruins, another one that might be a shock to some people. But look, they went 3-6 in their conference last year. They're getting into year 2 of their head coach. I don't think their schedule is favorable. They have Penn State. They're on the road against Michigan State, on the road against Indiana, on the road against Ohio State, on the road against USC, and they also host Washington, who I also think is going to be improved this year. Brian and I talked about UCLA before the show, and I do like their receiving core. That is something that they do have going for them, truthfully. Where I don't have a lot of faith is in Nico. And I know that was a big hot topic of conversation this offseason, but listen. We're talking about a quarterback who threw for 19 touchdown passes last year. 11 of them came against Vanderbilt, Tennessee Chattanooga, and University of Texas El Paso. He had no touchdown passes against Georgia. He didn't have any touchdown passes, against Florida, none against Arkansas on the road. He didn't have any against Ohio State in the bowl game. So I know we're kind of taking opposite ends of the spectrum here between University of Texas El Paso and Georgia and Ohio State. I understand that, but it goes to supporting cast for me. If you're not able to produce more as a quarterback with Deontay Thornton, Brew McCoy, and Squirrel White, I don't know what you're going to be able to do with a better UCLA receiving core than what they had last year. They're also not going to have a running back like Dylan Sampson. I think they got one of the Cal transfers at running back, if I remember correctly, but I think offensively they're going to struggle. That on top of their schedule, I think that's going to be pretty tough. Defensively, they lost both of their impact linebackers from last year, Carson Schweisinger and Kane Medrano. And then their secondary is completely made up of transfer portal players as well. I just think that there's too many moving pieces with UCLA for them to put it together this year. But, Nico going into year 3 college football, year 2 at UCLA, their head coach going into year 3 in 2026, I could see them working their way up there. But I think they're a year away from truly making some strides in conference. My number 16 team, Purdue Boilermakers. And some of this, truthfully, comes down to I just don't think they repeat how bad they were last year.
Can't be worse.
Exactly. No, literally cannot be worse. But I said this when we previewed Purdue this year. If they can establish some sort of identity as a program under Barry Odom, I think naturally that will get them at least a win. Just a win. And that is a significant improvement from last year. I said with Purdue, throw out overall record, throw out final scores. If they establish some sort of identity as a team, they are going to look better than what they did last year. Mind you, that is a very, very low bar to surpass. But again, to Brian's point, there's so many moving pieces. You got Barry Odom going into year 1. You have new coaches on staff. You have a host of different transfer portal players that you're relying on at almost every key spot. So I have Purdue at 16th. Would it surprise me if they slipped to 17th or even 18th? No, it wouldn't. But I don't think that they're going to be blown out like they were last year. I don't know if I'm going to be able to repeat my stat of you give them a 34-point head start in every game and they're still 6-6.
That is still one of the wildest statistics I've ever heard in my entire life.
Yeah.
You need to spot them 34 points just to make them bowl eligible. Mm-hmm. And I would assume in a lot of those games, Trevor, they weren't convincing wins. And a lot of the ones they get a win.
No, they're
That's
6
so
and 6 wins. They're
That's so
winning by
weird.
like 10 points or less, and four
Yeah.
of their 6 losses are still by double digits if you spot them 34
Yeah.
points. I do not see them being that bad.
You spotted them 40 against Notre Dame, they still lose by 19.
Yeah. Yeah, not great. They're rounding out my bottom 15, my bottom 4 teams. I have Northwestern at 15. They went 2-7 last year. I have them very similar again this year. They have Oregon, Penn State, Nebraska, USC, Michigan, and Illinois on their schedule. I will be interested to see how Preston Stone does with them. He's the SMU transfer that Kevin Jennings took over for last year. I think they're going to put a lot on his shoulders. What I like about the team, I think they actually have a pretty decent defensive line. I think that's going to be probably their best position group on the football team next year. But honestly, I'm just not in love with the overall talent on the roster. They have question marks in their secondary, and they have a rough in-conference schedule. So that, on top of all the reasons that Brian listed out, I also have Purdue in the bottom 4th of this league as well.
Going to the next group of 4, Trev, I have the Wisconsin Badgers. It doesn't, on to a degree, it doesn't even matter how much improved Wisconsin's going to be this year. I do think that Luke Fickell made some positive changes from a coaching staff standpoint from last season. But if you want to talk about, like, one of my favorite comments that you said, we were talking about, I can't remember why we were talking about Wisconsin, but you said Wisconsin has the schedule that USC thinks that they do. And I thought that was probably one of my favorite comments this offseason, Trevor, was that one, because it is a absolutely brutal schedule. And when I look at Wisconsin and I look at the things that they have done to improve their team, I do think that it was necessary for them to make a change. I thought that Phil Longo was never a good hire. We've talked about that before. That hire never made sense to me. They went out and got Billy Edwards, the quarterback from Maryland we talked about. It's a kid with Big Ten experience. I think their offensive line has a chance to be very good this season, but I just go back to the issues of, I don't think they have great talent at the skill positions. And when I look at their defense, I don't think they have the athletes that they've had in the past, really on any level. Losing the kid to not Jaden Lucas. Not Jaden Lucas, but Xavier Lucas to Miami was a big blow for them. He played a bunch as a freshman last year. They don't have getting Takis Curtis from USC. It was a good pickup. I think he'll be better this year, but they've got okay talent everywhere except the offensive line, and they play an absolutely brutal schedule. And I don't know what Luke Fickell did or what the AD at Michigan did to tick off the powers that be in the Big Ten, but they've got to play. Not only do they got to play at Alabama in the non-conference, their conference schedule is after the Maryland game, which is a nice way to start, at Michigan, home against Iowa, home against Ohio State, at Oregon, home against Washington, at Indiana, home against Illinois, at Minnesota. For a team like Wisconsin, it's just a brutal schedule. I just don't see them playing well. I have UCLA at 13. I actually like UCLA more than you do this year, Trev, and I get some of your concerns. I think Nico's overrated, but I don't think he's a terrible quarterback. I think the things that him and his family said about needing more help around him and all that, I think is nonsense. You don't complain about the pass protection at Tennessee and then go to UCLA. I just no. He will have good guys to throw to, however. But is it so good? Is the talent at receiver so good that it's going to overcome some of the other issues? We'll see. They got a couple portal pickups on the offensive line that are going to need to step up if they're going to be good. But I do like the portal additions they made in the secondary. They're solid. I think they're a quality team. The problem for UCLA, Trev, is they're another team that I think is going to be better. They're going to look better than their schedule is going to allow them to look. And they start off at Northwestern, which is an easier win. They've got Maryland at home. The rest of their schedules, Penn State at home, at Michigan State, at Indiana, home against Nebraska, at Ohio State, home against Washington, at USC. That's a really tough slate. Really tough slate. Here's the thing I will tell you. I do think this team will be competitive. And that's one thing I respected about Deshaun Foster's team last year. Even when they got beat soundly, they battled. Like you go back and watch the Penn State game, for example, the LSU game for another example, the Oregon game. They got beat convincingly on the scoreboard of all of those games. Indiana beat them convincingly. They played hard every game. They just don't have the athletes, and I don't know that they have the coaching to be better than this. I think their ceiling this year, Trevor, is 10th in the Big Ten. Their floor is bottom 4, in my opinion. And I just don't know that Nico is the type of talented quarterback that elevate them the way that people think that they will. And that's where you and I certainly agree. Number 12 for me is the Michigan State Spartans. This is another team, Trevor, that I have on here that is going to be a much improved football team, but they're going to struggle to allow it to show record-wise. They were 5-7 this year. I could see them only making a 1 or 2 game improvement. They're going to have to beat Boston College at home out of conference if they're going to make a bowl game this year, because their in-conference schedule is very challenging. It's at USC, at Nebraska, home against UCLA, at Indiana, home against Michigan, at Minnesota, home against Penn State, at Iowa, and then Maryland in Detroit. That is not an easy schedule. I do have Michigan State improving record-wise. I just don't think the record's going to – it may not improve as much as I think their actual team is improved. I think the big jump for Michigan State may come next year because they still have a lot of players with eligibility beyond the season. And if Jonathan Smith can keep this team together and continue recruiting, I think he's doing a good job of finding sleepers like D'Antonio used to do back in the day and getting some quality portal pickups. I think next year is when you see Michigan State make a big jump. But they do have the talent, Trevor, to me. This is the floor for Michigan State for me. This is a floor team for me because of their schedule. And because a lot of their tougher games are at home. Getting Michigan at home, getting Penn State at home is not ideal because you might lose to both of them at home. And then you've already got Nebraska, USC, Indiana, and Iowa on the road. So that's where I'm at. But I still like this football team. I think that they're trending in the right direction. I just don't know if the schedule will allow them to necessarily reflect how much improvement they're making. And then number 11 for me is Minnesota. This is another team that's evidence of how good the league is. I like this Minnesota team. If I was doing a power ranking, I'd probably have them higher. This is another floor team for me, Trev. That's a lot of it's about their schedule. You know, you've got to play at Ohio State. You've got to play at Iowa. You got to play at Oregon. You get Michigan State at home. You get Nebraska at home. I could see them being higher than this. I could see them being in the top 5 to 6. The big concern for me is a quarterback. And Drake Lindsey is projected to be the starting quarterback. He won the job. You know, they brought in Zach Pyron from Georgia Tech, a guy that Notre Dame fans watched play last year. They got beat out by Drake Lindsey, who's a very talented passer. But he's a redshirt freshman, and I don't know that he has the tools and upside necessarily right now of a Julian Sand, of a CJ Carr, you know, of some of the redshirt freshmen that we've talked about in college football, the year 2 guys in college football, the DJ Lagways, those type of guys, to necessarily like elevate them. Their offensive line's a bit of a question mark for me. They lost Phillip Daniels to Ohio State. They had to bring in 2 transfers. That's going to be the key because I love their backfield. They got Javon Tracy from Miami of Ohio, who was the leading receiver for Miami of Ohio last year. They got Logan Loya out of the portal from UCLA, who's a really shifty slot type of guy. I like their weapons. They got one of the most underrated DNs in the league in Anthony Smith. There's a lot to like about this team, Trev, but it's a tougher schedule. And they've got a quarterback and an offensive line that are question marks. How well the offensive line holds up and how quickly Drake Lindsey can get comfortable are the keys to whether or not they can go beyond their floor. This is a floor pick for me. If they can get up to their ceiling, Trev, of top 5 to 6 in the league, those 2 positions are going to be the reason why.
Getting into my next tier of the Big Ten teams, at number 14, I have the Rutgers Scarlet Knights. Last season, they went 4-5 in conference, and I think, kind of taking a phrase out of Brian's book here, I think some of it might have been a little smoke and mirrors type of deal. They beat Washington last year. I think they're going to be improved. They beat Michigan State last year. I think they're going to be improved. This year's schedule, they still have Iowa. They're still on the road against Washington, Oregon, at Illinois, at Ohio State, Penn State. So their schedule is not going to do them any favors. It's a rough schedule. They do return their starting quarterback, but to Brian's point, sometimes a returning starting quarterback isn't always the best thing. You know, when you look at their offensive line, they return the interior of their offensive line. There's some question marks at tackle. But then you flip over to the defensive side, their linebackers are extremely young and inexperienced. A lot of their experience came on special teams, and then they're going to have all new starters in the secondary. So that's going to be really interesting when you go and break them down, especially considering some of the passing offenses that they're going to have to play this upcoming season with Oregon on the schedule and Ohio State on the schedule. Washington's going to be on the schedule. So I think Rutgers is going to struggle this year. I have them as my number 14 team. My number 13 team is Wisconsin. You could argue they have the toughest schedule in the Big Ten. You're at Michigan, Iowa, Ohio State, at Oregon, Washington, at Indiana, Illinois. Unfortunately, they're just going to be a victim of their schedule, and I think their schedule is going to overshadow a really good hire that I liked from them. I like the Jeff Grimes hire. You know, it may take them back to the old school Wisconsin days where they're going to be emphasis on the run, you know, zone running scheme, play action passes. That's what made Wisconsin good. You know, they're going to be relying on transfer quarterback Billy Edwards. He has Big Ten experience, but we know what Maryland was last year. See what that does. But the key to Wisconsin's success this year for me is going to be their defense. Defense has going to have to find a way to generate some wins. They had 12 total takeaways in 2024. Not interceptions, not fumble recoveries, 12 total takeaways in 2024, Brian. That's rough. And that also leads into why their season looked the way that it did. That's why they lost to Alabama by 32. That's why they lost to, USC by 17. That's why they lost to Penn State by 15 and Iowa by 32. And the closest game they played was Oregon, who was just happened to be the number one team in the country at that point in time. But then you go and you get blown out by Nebraska, and then you lose by 17 to Minnesota. So, I can like the defensive hire all I want, or not the defensive. I can like the offensive hire all that I want. And I think that Jeff Grimes could do some good things for them, but their schedule on top of that defense is just going to be a question mark. It's going to be tough to overcome. My number 12 team is Minnesota. Last year they went 5-4. I have them a little bit under that this upcoming season. Their schedule's rough. They're at Ohio State, you get Nebraska, at Iowa. They're home against Michigan State, and then they're at Oregon. So, potentially 3 of the 4 top teams in the Big Ten, depending on whose list you're looking at. I mean, Minnesota's got them on the road. But I have a lot of question marks about this team, and I think that some of their potential upside may be outweighed a little bit by the questions. At quarterback, you're going from a 6-year senior to a redshirt freshman who is talented. But then I also start looking at who he's going to be throwing to. Their main wide receiver duo from last year with Daniel Jackson and Elijah Spencer are both gone. Those 2 guys accounted for 50% of the team's receptions, yards, and touchdowns from last year. The offensive line, they have to replace 3 starters. I do like Darius Taylor. I like him as a returning running back. He kind of bounced around the conversation for us, Brian, when we were breaking down like top 5 running backs and top 10 running back rooms. He's a good talent.
We both had them in the top 10, right? I believe we
so.
both had Minnesota as one of the 10 best backfields in college football this year.
Yep. But it comes down to their performance of their offensive line. And then defensively, they lost their defensive coordinator in Corey Heatherman, who Notre Dame will actually be facing on August 31st. That's another factor with them. They're going to be kind of in a new system. Coy Perch returns. He is the bright spot on defense, but he's the only returner in their secondary. They still have to replace their top 2 cornerbacks and their number 1 nickel from last year. I think all of that combined with their schedule. Now, their ceiling, I agree with Brian, is a lot higher than 12th if those questions can get answered. But then when you start talking about replacing your top 2 receivers and a redshirt freshman at quarterback and 3 starters on the offensive line and an entire new secondary and a new defensive coordinator, those questions kind of start to mount up. This is definitely a floor pick for me. It wouldn't surprise me if they went higher, but I have them at 12 for now. And then rounding out this group at number 11, I have Michigan State. You're going into year 2 of the Jonathan Smith era. On paper, they don't improve a ton. Like from last season when they went 3-6 in conference, I do have them improving to 4-5. But you look at who they got. They're on the road against USC, on the road against Indiana. They get Michigan, Penn State, and at Iowa. Yeah, it kind of just comes down to them being more competitive. Last season you lose to Ohio State by 31, Oregon by 21, Indiana by 37, Illinois by 22, and Rutgers by 27. Michigan State is going to have to find a way to be more competitive in those games, and I do think that they will. I like Aiden Childs going into his, I believe, 3rd year with the program, 2nd year as a starter. Is that right?
2nd year with the program, 3rd year in Jonathan Smith's system.
Okay.
He played for Jonathan Smith as a freshman at Oregon State, followed him to Michigan State. So 2nd year at Michigan State, 2nd year as a starter, but 3rd year in the offense.
Okay, I get you. I get you. I like it. I think he's poised for a breakout season. I think they have a very underrated wide receiving core in the Big Ten. Very underrated wide receiving core.
Marsh is a legit dude in the Big Ten,
Yep.
in my opinion, a receiver.
Absolutely. And I think they're going to be better on defense. But like the final scores indicated that I rattled off last year in conference, the bar is set relatively low, but I do think they're going to be better on defense.
Yeah. Agree, Trev. They're missing that high-level defensive talent that they had back in the D'Antonio. They're tough kids, smart kids, try-hard kids. They just don't they don't have enough of the high-level, like all Big Ten type of guys that they had. Like, remember they had that great corner duo, and they had the Bullas were like every year there was a new Bulla starting the middle linebacker for them. You know, like I can't remember his name, but I think his last name was Jones. But they signed a running back out of high school that they were going to move to linebacker. And it's like, this guy, if he can figure out how to play linebacker, is going to be so good. And he ended up being really good. They just don't have as much of that. I think it's coming though. Like you said, on paper, they're not going to look that much improved. But you're going to look at them and say, boy, that's a team that people are going to be worried about next year. And when a team is like that, there's always the chance they peak a year early. And that's what makes Michigan State a little bit dangerous. Do they peak a year early? Then maybe you and I think they're going to peak.
Well, and that's what makes them interesting. If it clicks, it's going to be evident when it clicks.
Yeah.
You know, you look at the order of how they have these. I mean, you start off the year at USC, at Nebraska. That's rough. But then I look at UCLA. Can they be competitive against Indiana and Michigan? They're on the road against Minnesota. So there's tough games mixed in there. But I think when it clicks, it's going to be evident when it does. It's another floor pick for me.
My number 10 team is the Michigan Wolverines. I look at this team, Trev, and I even with the schedule that is one of the more manageable in the league, I still don't see this as being a team that's going to be a whole lot better than they were last year. I don't. I've got, yes, they're going to be better at quarterback. I love their running back room. Running back talent wasn't really their problem last year. I think Justice Haynes, as I said, is one of the best pickups in the league. One of the most underrated pickups in all of college football, just as far as this didn't get the love that you'd expect an Alabama pickup to get. I guess when Alabama guys leave to go anywhere other than the SEC, they don't get as much attention. You look at him and Devontae Smith, for example. Look, I know that they got some nice pickups. You know, Donovan McCulley a couple years ago in Indiana was solid, and Anthony Simpson was solid at UMass. His film's not impressive. Frederick Moore's just kind of okay. Samaj Morgan's just kind of okay. You know, their tight end is big step back at tight end from losing Colson Loveland. The big thing for me though is I got questions about their offensive line. I would not feel great about Notre Dame's season if they were going into the year with Evan Link at left tackle. I wouldn't, and I don't see them having the same talent level up front. They're going to play hard, but you can play as hard as you want. But when you're going against guys who are just better athletes than you and just more physically gifted, you're going to struggle. And while I think their defense is still going to be very good, they're very good at linebacker. Their secondary is going to still be good. I don't, their talent level on the D-line is just not what it was from 21 to 24. It just isn't. You don't lose Aiden Hutchinson and Chris Jenkins and Mason Graham and the players and Kenneth Grant and the players they've lost and just be okay unless you've recruited at an elite level. And I don't think the recruiting has been as strong. There are still some really good plays there. You know, some really good players there. They obviously got Damon Payne out of the portal from Alabama. He's a very underachieving player at Alabama. He's talented, but he's a very underachieving player. I think Derek Moore is a really good player at defensive end, kind of a stand-up outside linebacker type of guy. Rayshon Benny has some ability, but it's just not the same D-line where they're going to go out there, in my opinion, and just hold Ohio State to 10 points in a win. And their secondary is going to be good, but it's not going to be what it was a couple years ago. So I think that they're improving in certain areas, quarterback, running back, receiver, but it's not enough. And I still think their schedule is challenging enough that I just don't see them making the big jump that some people think is gonna be, because I think there's an assumption that their offensive line is going to be really good. I didn't think it was very good last year, and I don't think it's going to be better this year. Number 9 for me is USC. This is another team that I had a hard time with, Trev. You know, there's a couple games on there that I could see going. When I say hard time, isn't this a projection, not a power ranking? Yes, there's like 2 to 3 games that I have a really tough time predicting for USC, to where if they win 1 or 2 of those, now all of a sudden this whole thing gets switched upside down. I think USC has a chance this year, Trev, to be improved, but I just don't know how improved. I think they played very well down the stretch last season offensively. We started to see some flashes of Lincoln Riley's offense looking like Lincoln Riley's offense again. Obviously, they played as well against Notre Dame as any team in the country. They did well against Texas A&M for the most part. They had a solid performance against Nebraska. They looked solid against Washington. They had no problem getting yards. They were over 400 yards, Trev, in 7 of their last 8 games. It's just they couldn't put the ball in the end zone, turnovers, red zone woes, things like that. I don't know that gets a lot better this year. I really don't. I mean, I look at a guy like Jade Maeva, and he's a talented player, but he threw 6 interceptions in his last 4 games. The year before, he threw 10 interceptions at UNLV, including 6 in his last 4 games. This is kind of what he does. He turns the ball over. So unless he can kind of get past that, which is certainly possible, I think they're going to have a tougher time. Their offensive line should be okay. It's not great. I don't think they're running. I think they're not as good at running back this year. They lost a lot of receiver. That's the one area that I think they're going to be better. You and I talked about this when we previewed USC. They had way too many mouths to feed last year. It's going to be a shorter rotation this year. Mekhi Lemon, I see, as a breakout. Jacoby Lane's going to be a good player, a solid tight end play. They don't have that third receiver, though, that really says, boy, if teams are like a team like a Notre Dame, teams like Michigan, Illinois, Ohio State that have good cover players, they can take your first guy or two out of the game. You're in trouble because you don't have that third guy that can really step up. And their defense is going to be better because it's going to be coached better. The talent is still not great. It's good. It's not great. And when you look at their schedule this year, Trev, it's tough enough to where improving is going to be a challenge. They start off at Purdue, then they get Michigan State at home, then they're at Illinois, home against Michigan, at Notre Dame, not a Big Ten game, at Nebraska, home against Northwestern, home against Iowa, at Oregon, home against UCLA. So right now I have Illinois, Nebraska, and Oregon as losses. If that changes, and then there's a couple other games that Iowa at home could be a battle. I've got them winning that game. Michigan State at home. They've got to just be more consistent this year. And if they're able to do that, then I think they have a shot to be better. I think their overall record is going to be better. I just don't know how much higher they're going to be in the Big Ten rankings. Number 8 for me is the Washington Huskies. This is another team that I have lower because I still have question marks about their offensive line. Major question marks about their offensive line. If you could put Notre Dame's offensive line in Washington, they're a top 4 team in the maybe 4 to 5 team in the Big Ten for me. Love their running back. You talked about Jonah Coleman earlier in your show, Trav, as a potential offense, dark horse offensive player of the year. He's very good. Damon Williams is a very exciting player. We saw what he could do as a starter late in the year last year, quarterback. When he stepped up late in the season and against Oregon, passes for 201 yards, goes 17 of 20 passing against Oregon, and throws for 201 yards off the bench and a touchdown, then gets the start against Louisville in the bowl game, completes 81.3% of his passes for 374 yards, 11.7 per completion, 4 touchdowns and a pick. In the game, they lost 35-34, and he also rushed for 48 yards and a touchdown in that game. He's a scrambler. He's not a guy that you're going to be running a bunch of designed runs with, but they can run read zone and stuff, but he's a scrambler. He's a guy that things break down. He can go make some plays. Got a little bit of Everett Golson to his game, Trev, with the exception of maybe the turnovers stretches that Everett have. Exciting player. Love their receiving core. Boston's got a chance to be an impact player. I think Amari Evans fits what they do really well, the transfer from Penn State, as sort of a vertical player. There's a lot. Defense is going to be improved. There's a lot to like about this team, Trev. It all comes down to their offensive line, and right now I don't have a lot of faith in it. And that's why I have them 8th. If their offensive line improves, they are a sleeper team to have a big jump in the Big Ten this year, the Huskies. And then number 7 is Illinois Fighting Illini, and they're tied record-wise with several teams above them. It's just you got to kind of place them based on some other factors. I could see Illinois being a little bit better than this, but they're going to have to, step up and kind of finish strong. And I think they're going to be a good team. I have them with 3 losses, though. It's another team with 3 losses, Trev, because their schedule is not easy. They play at Indiana. They play home against Ohio State, at Washington, home against USC, at Wisconsin. So they're another team that I think this is their floor. They're a floor team for me, but that's why I have Illinois number 7.
When I put together this list, my 4 through 10 were all like 1 or 2 games away from being drastically different in these rankings. And that's what made this so difficult. It goes back to what we were talking about at first about how deep this conference could potentially be. But at number 10, I do have Nebraska. They went 3-6 last season. I have them improved. On this year's schedule, they get Michigan, Michigan State, USC, at Penn State, Iowa. They have a rough schedule, but outside of Penn State, their most difficult opponents they get at home. There's a lot of things to like here. You get Dylan Raiola in year 2, Matt Rule in year 3. They have the potential to be better, and I know this is going to probably sound like a broken record to some, but I was talking to Brian about this before the show, and it's like, look, man, Nebraska is one of those teams like Iowa that I just file into the cabinet of every single year. We are told how much better they're going to be because of this and this and this and this and this. I just have to see it with them. They have the tools to do it, but they've also had the tools to do it before in the past. Nothing would surprise me more than to see them in the top 7 of this league. Nothing would surprise me more.
They flat out last year's team should have been better than it was. Flat out. They had the talent to be better than they were last year. You and I see their prediction differently, but we see the concerns the same. It's show me mode. Part of predicting is just saying, I think they're going to do it this year. But everything you've said about Nebraska this offseason is absolutely fair and valid. They do have to show it. Absolutely.
The one thing I will say, though.
Can I ask you a question on this one?
Yeah.
Do you at all put anything into year 3 of Matt Rule being that year? Like when you were putting this together, did you think about that at all?
I do. Like my feelings of Nebraska have me at 10 because I think this is their floor. I do not see them going any lower than this. And I think Matt Rule going into year 3, and I know for some it's like 10th is their to some 10th might not sound impressive. And I understand that. When you have a league with 18 teams in it, 10 being your absolute floor is pretty darn decent, if you ask me, especially when you went 3-6 in conference last year. Matt Rule has shown in year 3 that his teams improve. It's just one of those where I've seen all the signs pointing in the right direction before for Nebraska. I just got to see it, but you got the pieces. I love that they brought in Dane Key and Nazai Hunter at wide receiver. You get Rocco Spindler and Elijah Pritchett along the offensive line. You getting good pieces. I just got to see them put it all together. And nothing would shock me more than to watch them rise in this list. Number 9 for me is Indiana. And they went 8-1 last season. We all know the type of in-conference schedule they had last year. I think when you watch them on the field, I think it's going to look very similar to what it did last year. I think they're going to dominate the bad teams, and then I think they're going to lose to the opponents that they're supposed to lose to. So why do I have them at number 9? It's because on this year's schedule, they get Illinois, at Iowa, at Oregon, Michigan State, and at Penn State. Everyone on there is new except for Michigan State, who should be improved of their tougher opponents. To be honest with you, I really like their roster. They returned some key pieces. Omar Cooper, Elijah Surratt. I like Mendoza. He's a good portal quarterback. And they return impact talent at every level on defense. You get Mikhail Kamara, Aiden Fisher, D'Angelo Pons, and Amari Farrell back on the defensive side. So you have impact talent at every level of the defense. I just think it's going to be what it was last year, is once you start getting into the upper brass of you're on the road against Penn State. You're on the road against Iowa. You have to, you're on the road against Oregon. I think that's when you start to see the gap between that level of talent and, the Penn State level of talent. So I think IU is still going to be a good program, just a victim of their schedule. Number 8 team for me is the Iowa Hawkeyes. They went 6-3 last season, and I think that their schedule is more difficult than last year. You get Indiana, Penn State, Oregon, at USC, Michigan State, and at Nebraska. I like Mark Gronowski. I like what I saw from him at San Diego State, but I have the same question for him as I do from any quarterback making a big jump from, group of 5 level to, big primetime football. I have those questions about Joey Aguilar going from App State to Tennessee. I'm absolutely going to have those questions about Mark Gronowski going from the SCS level to the Big Ten. Do I think he's going to be good? I do, but there is still that lingering question in the back of my head. How good? Because we've seen some good things from him so far in camp. I like this Iowa team. I think Caleb Johnson leaving at running back, there's a big void to fill there. That's going to be interesting. But Iowa's one of those teams, man. Phil Parker's got that defense humming. I never really have concerns about Iowa's defense. They returned 3 of their 4 best defensive ends from last season. Strong safety comes back as well. They have very inexperienced linebackers, but again, kind of like what we were talking about at the very beginning of this with David Pollack, when you've kind of seen a team do it year over year, when one side of the ball is just consistently good, I think Iowa's defense is still going to be good. But similar question for me with Nebraska. Yes, it always comes down to Iowa's offense. And I know that now this year, Mark Gronowski is supposed to make this offense something.
No. This is the year that they figured out. No. Now this is the year. No. Now this is the year they fit. Yes.
Yep. So, and if that happens this year, then Iowa's also going to be a team that moves up in my rankings. But right now, I have them number 8. Number 7 for me.
They lost Cooper. I'm sorry, they lost Cooper DeJean and still gave up 17.8 points per game last year. Cooper DeJean. And still only gave up 17 points per game last year. You're spot on in your analysis of Phil Parker. Absolutely.
Yeah, man. He's humming. He's going to be
exactly.
Good. My number 7 team is the Washington Huskies. They went 4-5 last season. I have them as one of my most improved teams in the Big Ten. They still have Ohio State, at Michigan, Illinois, and Oregon on their schedule, but you get some of your bigger opponents at home. You get Ohio State at home, Oregon at home, and Illinois at home, which bodes well for a team that hasn't lost a home game in 3 years. Unfortunately, I do think that streak ends this year because of who's on their home slate, but it's still a tough place to play. Love Damon Williams and Jonah Coleman. I think that's one of the most dynamic backfields in the conference, quarterback, running back combo. It's electric. Denzel Boston at wide receiver should have another big year. He's one of their more productive guys in conference last season, not just on Washington, but in the conference as a whole. Their offensive success, like Brian said, it's going to come down to offensive line play. They allowed 39 sacks last season. That's the worst in the Big Ten. And that's pretty rough considering you were in a conference with Maryland and Purdue. Just is. Offensive line play is going to have to get better. Defensively, I really like their pickup from Arizona, Takario Davis, huge pickup.
Yeah, the DB. Yeah.
Yes. I mean that literally and figuratively. He's 6'4" and is a corner. So it's a big pickup, but I like where their defense is headed.
2 years ago at Arizona, he was really good. And now he's coming back. He stayed at Arizona last year, didn't come with Jed Fish, and then now he's coming. He had a much better year 2 years ago. Little nugget here, Trev. Washington, I have Ohio State. A loss that I have for Ohio State. I'll just say this: I have them losing in Seattle. I have them losing to Washington. I'll talk more about that when I get to Ohio State. But I just want to throw that little nugget in here. They won't lose both of those games, and I think there's a better chance they win both than lose both. That's my prediction. My number 6 team is the Nebraska Cornhuskers, Trevor. I agree with everything you said about Nebraska. I won't repeat any of it because everything you nailed, everything you said was spot on. I just think that the schedule is such that, or I think that number one, we talk about a lot of, hey, you got to show me you can do it. Well, this is what Matt Rule does. He did this at Temple, inherited a team, I think went 2-10 in his first year. And then by his third year, they were a 10-win team and spent time ranked in the top 25, won 10 games in back-to-back years. That got him, I believe to Baylor, which then got him to the Panthers, or did he go to the Panthers before Baylor? I forget which one it was. But he's a guy that he can rebuild teams, and I think this is a more talented team than the Temple or the Baylor teams. Dylan Raiola is a good very good talented quarterback. Still has some growing up to do, as all sophomores do. That's not an insult towards maturity. Just he's not going to be a finished product as a sophomore. I don't care how talented he is. Love the portal pickups at receiver. I liked last year's portal pickups at receiver. I like the offensive line pickups. I think their defense is still going to be talented. Their defense was pretty good last year at times. They just were so inconsistent on defense. They'd look really good against Ohio State and then just get obliterated by Indiana. They've got to find some consistency on defense, and I think they do that this year. That's why I like Nebraska. And I think their schedule is challenging, but it's also very manageable. They don't play Ohio State. They do play Penn State, but they don't play Oregon. But they get Michigan at home. They get Michigan State at home. They get Northwestern at home. They get USC at home, and they get Iowa at home. Their road games are Maryland, Minnesota, UCLA, and Penn State. If they are the team that we think they can be, that schedule sets up very nicely for Nebraska to finish in the top half, if not the top third of the Big Ten. My number 5 team is the Indiana Hoosiers. I think this is going to be a very good Indiana team. I think you said they're going to be a victim of their schedule. I think is one of the was that the team that you said that about?
Yeah.
I agree. Look, I think they're going to be really good on defense. I love the Francisco Mendoza pickup. I think their receiving core, you could make a case that after Ohio State, this is the best receiving core in the Big Ten. They're in the conversation now that because of Evan Stewart's injury at Oregon. I think they're absolutely in that conversation. They're still good at running back. Their defense, like I said, their offensive line, good pickups there at Iowa, at Oregon, at Penn State. And then you got Illinois at home. So if you do beat, pull an upset against Iowa, does it come on the heels of an upset at home against Illinois? Like that's where I'm at. It's just a much more challenging schedule. And while I think Indiana was very good last year and deserved a playoff bid, they were a product of their schedule. This year, it's a much tougher schedule, in my opinion. And I think that's why they finished in the top 5. But that's still a good second year for Curt Cignetti. 9-3, still a good season for them. Number 4 for me, the Iowa Hawkeyes. You said it. Phil Parker's going to have that team balling. I had them in their top 10 offensive line when we did our top 10 offensive line breakdown. Their skill weapons are okay. They're nothing special. They're solid, though. It really comes down to quarterback. And I love the Mark Gronowski pick. This kid's a winner and led South Dakota State to a national championship at the FCS level. He's a quality athlete. It reminds me a lot of Ian Book. Like not the biggest guy, not a designed runner, but a scrambler, a gamer. I think he takes more chances than Ian did at the FCS level. Now let's see if he can do that at the Big Ten level. That's really the big question mark because he is making that FCS to FBS jump. I want to see that, but he doesn't have to light the world on fire. He just has to be solid. Like it's like Iowa is what people say about Michigan. If they just can get solid quarterback play, they're going to be really good. Well, that's what's true about Iowa as well. And losing Caleb Johnson is going to hurt, but Trev, I just like this team, man. I really like this team. And I think when you look at their schedule, I think it sets up nicely in conference. They play Penn State, but they get Penn State at home. They play Oregon, but they get Oregon State at home. They don't play Ohio State. They play at Wisconsin. They get Indiana at home also. They play at Wisconsin, at Rutgers, at USC. That'll be tough, and at Nebraska. And so when I have them losing to Nebraska, losing to USC. I actually have them upsetting Oregon this season and pulling off that victory, Trev. And I let me pull some up real quick just to make sure that I got that correct because I think I might be misremembering something, but. Did I have them? Yes, I have them pulling off an upset also over Penn State. So just keep that in mind. So, yes, I think this is the year that the offense finally figures it out. The key for Iowa is this. Can they beat Iowa State on the road in week 2? September 6th, they play at Iowa State. Can they get payback for losing at home to Iowa State last year? If they do, there's a really good chance that going into November, Iowa's if you can beat Oregon, if you can go 2-1 against or 3-1 against Oregon, USC, and Michigan State, Nebraska, you're a playoff team. If you can do that. So if they can beat Iowa State, my prediction is that they go into November in the playoff hunt. And then we'll see how they finish. So number 3, Trev, is the Oregon Ducks. I actually like Oregon this year. I think Penn State and Ohio State are better. That's who's left. You guys can deduce who I have left. I think there's a lot of turnover in Oregon. I think that's going to factor in quarterback turnover, O-line turnover. Evan Stewart's hurt. Like Mekhi Hughes. They got talented players in the offensive line, but it's still got to come together. The defense has just never been able to play to its talent level under Dan Lanning, which is wild because he's a defensive coach. Love Will Stein as an OC. He's a top 5 OC. There's a lot to like about Oregon this year, Trev. I mean, I really like this Oregon team. I just think that there's a lot of turnover, and then they got to play at Penn State. They have to play at Iowa. They have to play at Washington, home against USC, home against Indiana. I just think it's a much tougher slate top to bottom than they faced last year, where they didn't have to play Penn State. They got Ohio State at home. This year they play at Penn State. This year they play at Washington. I just think the road is a little tougher for them. I still think they're a very good football team and will be a contender. They'll go into November, Trev, as a team that is in the playoff hunt and in the Big Ten title hunt. That's where they're going to be. I think they're a one-loss team going into November. The question is, can they then remain a one-loss team playing at Iowa, home against Minnesota, home against USC, at Washington. That's going to be the key. And right now I have them third in the league.
Rounding out my final tier of 4 teams here, I have Michigan at number 6. Now, I am taking more of the ceiling of what this team could be. I do not see them getting higher than 6. I was going into it with the notion of the questions that they have potentially get worked out. And then I am also kind of building off of how they finished last season. They're strongly helped out by their schedule. They get Purdue, Northwestern, and Maryland all in the same schedule. And Brian and I both believe those are the bottom teams in the Big Ten. They get Ohio State at home. They get Washington at home. They get Wisconsin at home. Probably 3 of the hardest places, some of the hardest places to play in the Big Ten right now. They do still have at USC and at Michigan State, so keeping my eye on those games as well. But can they build off of last season? Quarterback play is going to be improved by default. One of my favorite portal pickups, along with Brian's, is Justice Haynes. Their offensive success is going to come down to wide receiver play and offensive line play. Look, I am not a fan of what their outside skill positions are. I'm not. And then when you further that with questions along the offensive line, that's questionable. But Michigan was competitive in some games last year with a dormant offense. I mean, they won how many games? They went 4-0 in games last year where they all passed for under 90 yards. That's insane. And so kind of begs the question, how good do their pass catchers have to be? Better than what I think they have to. But I still think this team is going to be carried by their defense. You know, you're going into year 2 of Wink Martindale. You have to replace some impact talent, but you do return some guys. You return TJ Guy, Derek Moore on the edge. You get Trey Williams from Clemson and Damon Payne from Alabama along the interior. Jayshon Barham and Ernest Hausman return at linebacker. Then you get Rod Moore back at safety after a torn ACL. We'll see how he bounces back from a healthy season. But I'll say this. I don't see Michigan getting much higher. I could see them falling. This is one of the teams that I think has the most variance in my rankings because there is a lot. A little nugget for you, and I know you're not going to like it, Archer. I have them when I broke down their predictions for this year, I have them beating Ohio State strictly because I have nothing that tells me they won't. Because of the history of the last 4 games. I could very easily be wrong. Part of me kind of hopes that I am per what these rankings are, and that's how much I just don't like Michigan. But up until they win, they get Michigan at home this year too. So up until I see it, they beat them when they won the national championship. I could very well be wrong on that, but I have Michigan as my number 6 team for now. My number 5 team, USC Trojans, falls in line with what my coach of the year pick was. They went 4-5 in conference last year, but I think they have a favorable schedule. They don't have Ohio State or Penn State. You get Michigan, Iowa, and Michigan State at home. You don't play Washington, and then you still play Oregon. So I think that's going to be interesting. Offense, like I've said all offseason, I think it's addition by subtraction. To Brian's point, less mouths to feed. I think Mekhi Lemon, Jacoby Lane, and Lake McCree are going to be a good offensive trio, and I think simplifying things for Jade Maeva could potentially help the turnover issue. Don't love what he did at UNLV, but I love that he's now learning from Lincoln Riley. For Lincoln Riley to move away from a player like Miller Moss to elect Jade Maeva, I think he did that for a reason. And by default, I kind of trust what Lincoln Riley does with his quarterbacks. Offensive line, you have a high ceiling, but can you live up to the potential? That's a question. Can you run the football? When you don't have Woody Marks or their other running back is escaping me right now, his name, but
Quentin Dunbar?
Quentin Joyner. Yeah.
Quentin Dunbar's from back in the day. Quentin Joyner, yes.
When you lose Quentin Joyner and Woody Marks in the same offseason, and then you replace it with the Sanders kid and you replace it with the kid that came from Hutchinson Community College, I don't know what that production is going to look like. I don't know how reliant they can be on the run. Huge question.
The film doesn't blow me away. It really doesn't.
Same.
Really doesn't.
I think you and I watched the community college kids film together, and we were breaking it down.
We pulled it up after a show. Yeah.
Yep. Not impressive. But defensively, I think is where they can help them out. If Lincoln Riley can, for the first time in his career, arguably have a defense that doesn't require their offense to score 40 points a game to win, that could be interesting. Year 2 of DeAnton Lynn. I don't love the talent. It's not, like, it's good talent to Brian's point, but it's not elite Notre Dame level talent.
It's not vintage USC talent.
No.
Yeah,
oh, right. No. But like Notre Dame, they got significantly bigger up front. From left to right on their D-line, they go 6'5", 285, 6'5", 290, 6'4", 330, 6'5", 265. They got a lot bigger and a lot longer. Eric Gentry returns. They had to redshirt him last year because he had too many concussions, but he's back at linebacker.
And he was
Kamari-
super productive in the few games he played, Trev.
Didn't
He have like 6.5 tackles for loss in like 4 games? Something like that.
He was their tackle for loss leader 4 games after he wasn't able to play. I mean, he was very, very productive. Very productive. Kamari Ramsey comes back at safety, but they need big-time performances from transfers DJ Harvey and Bishop Fitzgerald in their secondary for it to pan out and be what they think. But for now, I have USC at number 5. My number 4 team, the Fighting Illini, 6-3 last year. Tough first half of the schedule, easy back half. Illinois is a very interesting team for me. If they can make it through the first part of their conference schedule, which consists of on the road against Indiana, home against USC, at Purdue, home against Ohio State, and at Washington, if they can get through that relatively unscathed, they could be in the playoff discussion. However, if they're struggling through that on the road against Indiana, home against Ohio State, at Washington, they're a team that I think is out of playoff discussion heading into November because they're not going to have a signature win on their schedule that can put them back in that conversation. So that's what makes this interesting about Illinois. Luke Altmaier returns along with the entire offensive line, which could be good or bad if they perform like they did last season. They return all 5 starters on the offensive line. When you look at that in a vacuum, seems pretty decent. And so you start diving into the performance of how their offensive line was. It's going to be interesting to see how they replace Josh McCray. They lost him to the portal, but they do still have other quality running backs. Tanner Arkin returns at tight end. And then they'll be relying on Hudson Clement to elevate that wide receiving room. Defensively, they return Gabe. I'm not entirely sure how to pronounce his last name.
Can't help you.
Yeah, I have an idea.
He's really good. Big Gabe. Big Gabe.
Yep.
There you go.
Yep. They return Gabe, and they will also return Xavier Scott, which is huge for them. Dylan Rozek is back from injury, which is going to be big. They have an experienced secondary that returns a trio of good starters. So I'm high on Illinois this year, but I do run the concern of, did we see their peak last year? Have we seen the best that this team can be? That remains a question mark. And then my third team is Oregon, for all the reasons why you said. Like I said at the start of the show, I think the teams at the top take a step back, but not a major step back.
Yeah.
Don't love their schedule. They don't have Ohio State or Michigan, but they do still have on the road against Penn State, Indiana at home, at Iowa, USC, and at Washington. They have to hold serve at home and compete on the road. You get Penn State, Iowa, and Washington all on the road. You have to be able to hold serve in Eugene. Followed by, what will Dante Moore be? Will he take that next step? That is going to be a huge key because so far under Dan Lanning, he has had very experienced quarterbacks.
Very. Like you're 60-year senior, 5th years. Yeah. Wasn't Bo Nix 24 years old when he was drafted?
Yeah, Bo Nix spent his 5th year at Oregon, and that was his first year at Oregon, then went into his 6th year, I believe, and then they got Dylan Gabriel, who I think was also a 5th or 6th year senior.
He was a 6th. Dylan was definitely a 6th.
So then you got loads of experience at quarterback. How much are you going to put on the shoulders of Dante Moore? That balance with Will Stein and how he manages Dante Moore is going to be really interested to see. They have a very inexperienced offense, especially after losing Evan Stewart. They have a very high ceiling of a wide receiver core. I mean, you picked Ja'Cory Moore to be your offensive or your rookie of the year in the Big Ten. It's a lot of weight to put on a very young receiving core. Let's see if they pan out. And then
unproven, for sure.
Yeah,
for sure.
And then we get into the Mekhi Hughes conversation. Can he be what he's predicted to be? Maybe, but that's why
he was important to get up, though, Trev. I think you can rely on him a little bit more early while Dante's breaking in. Yeah,
absolutely. And then defensively, they'll be tested. You know, Derek Harmon, Jeffrey Bassa, and Jabbar Muhammad are all gone. You return Mateu Uiagalelei and Tatum. I'm going to butcher that last name too. You return both your edge rushers from last season. And secondary is also almost brand new, headlined by Dylan Thieneman. But Oregon could be well in the Big Ten championship discussion, or they're going to be kind of on the outside looking in towards the end of November.
Mm-hmm. Let's go to our top 2, Trev. We do have the same top 2 teams. I got Ohio State and Penn State. I think this is the class of the Big Ten. I think that Penn State has a schedule that's a little bit more favorable than Oregon's because of who they play at home and away. The Iowa game is going to be very interesting. Here, look, Penn State's season is going to be defined on September 27th when they host Oregon. If they can beat Oregon at home, they're in the Big Ten championship game because you play at Iowa, you play at Ohio State. If you win, even if you lose those 2 games, you're still in the driver's seat because now Oregon loses one more and their schedule's tough too. You have the head-to-head tiebreaker. If you can split with Iowa and Ohio State, you're coasting into the Big Ten title game. And that's kind of how I see it happening. So it's a worst case scenario for Penn State. They tie at 10-2 with Oregon, but they win the head-to-head if they beat Oregon early on. And right now I'm predicting that they will beat Oregon early on. I do have concerns if I'm Penn State. You play Nevada, Florida National, Villanova in a bye week. How quickly are you going to get up to speed against Oregon speed when Oregon is being tested by Oklahoma State, Northwestern, and Oregon State before they play you? Like, that is something I'm very, very curious to see kind of how that plays out, Trev, and see how long does it take Penn State to get up to speed. And then, of course, the other question is how long. And also, by the way, it should be noted that Oregon starts the season off against Montana State, whose only loss last year was in the FCS National Championship game by 3 points to North Dakota State. That's a pretty good football team as well, beating New Mexico last season. So they have that as their warm-up for Penn State. But then how do they handle traveling across the country, which is something the West Coast teams did not do well. We even saw Oregon struggle going to Wisconsin last season. They didn't play very well at Purdue. They dominated Purdue, but if you watch that game, that's an ugly game, Trev. Very ugly game for them. But a lot of talent, veteran team. I like Penn State. I just don't think that they're better than Ohio State. And when I look at Ohio State this season, Trevor, they have to replace a lot of good players. There's no doubt about that. They play a very talented, they have a lot of talent coming back on offense. Offensive line's got to get figured out. I'm a little bit more confident in the offensive line than I maybe thought I would have been in the offseason or going into the playoff last year because of the injuries. But those guys got a lot. Luke Montgomery, Austin Saraveld, the center, Carson Hensman. Yeah, Hensman. Can't believe I forgot his name. But they got a ton of experience in the playoffs last year and played well. They outplayed Notre Dame. You get Phillip Daniels from the portal. You get the kid from Rice from the portal. I don't love. Saraveld beat out one of those guys. They bumped him out to tackle. I just think there's a lot of talent here. And we've seen Ryan Day take first-year starters that have never thrown. I mean, Julian Love has more career pass attempts than what C.J. Stroud had going in his first year as a starter. Now, he's not C.J. Stroud, but the point is, I think he's going to be fine. I think they're still going to be very good on defense as long as Matt Patricia doesn't screw it up. And since I don't know what Matt Patricia is going to be because he spent time in the NFL, I can't say, well, I think Notre Dame's going to be fine with a coordinator that we don't know about because he's been in the NFL for a few years, and then not say this, give Ohio State the same benefit of the doubt. But that's going to be the big question mark for Ohio State is, can Matt Patricia keep this defense rolling? Because if he can't, you look at their schedule, Trev, in the month of November, well, the first 5 games, before they get out of November, because the first game's in August, they've got to play Texas and at Washington. If Matt Patricia can't keep the defense rolling, those are both losable games, especially the opener against Texas. And now you're going into Seattle on September 27th, facing a team that has not lost at home in 3 years, and you are in a can't afford to lose another game situation. Because if you lose that game, you got to play at Illinois, still got to play Penn State at home, got to play at Michigan. I think they beat Texas, and part of it's because I'm just giving Matt Patricia the benefit of the doubt. If I'm wrong, then this team it's going to be a disappointing year for Ohio State. I just don't think that it will be. I still think they're the most talented team in the league. I think that there's a lot of guys that were thrust into spots last year because of injury that's going to be very important for them this year. Yes, they lose a lot on the D-line. They're reloading, in my opinion. Eldrick Houston getting hurt in camp, that's a bit of a concern for me. But I think Kenyatta Jackson's going to be a beast this year. I think they're going to be great at linebacker with Arvo Reese stepping in. And as you mentioned earlier, their secondary should still be really, really good. Caleb Downs and Jermaine Matthews and Devin Sanchez and the Holding King. By the way, I love our board. There's already a Holding King thread where people are putting lyrics to what it should be for him on the board. It's so amazing. I love our board. That's already up. Show's not even over, and that's already up. So I just think this team is still the class of the Big Ten. Until proven otherwise, they're still the class of the Big Ten. I have them losing one game in the regular season, and that one game is on September 27th to the Washington Huskies. What I have them not losing any other games. If they lose to Texas and they lose to Washington and still run the table, they're playing in the Big Ten championship game and they're in the playoff. But the point is, if you do lose those two games, you can't afford to lose another one because then you might not even be in the playoffs at all. And that'll be the test for Ohio State this year.
Wrapping this up, my top two teams are also Penn State and Ohio State. Look, at the end of the day, this comes down to, I think, the teams who have arguably the two best rosters in the Big Ten. Penn State for more of the experience, Ohio State for more of the ceiling. For Penn State, look, it just comes down to what is Jim Knowles going to do on defense? Is he going to read the room a little bit and say, hey, their national championship window is kind of right now. I don't have 3 seasons to implement what I need to on defense for this to work. That's going to be a huge key. I'm not at all concerned about their run game on offense. Can their pass game be what we think that it can be with Devontae Ross and Trevor Pena and Kyron Hudson? Can those 3 combined with Luke Reynolds replace the impact of what you lost with Tyler Warren? You don't have any individual Tyler Warren on your roster. Very similar to what Marcus Freeman talked about with Riley Mills. You have to replace the production, not the player. And if Penn State's receiving core can live up to that, this is going to be a very good offense with the offensive line that they have coming back. Say what you want about Drew Aller. Having 3 years of starting experience in the Big Ten, that's worth something. That is absolutely worth something. And then with Ohio State, look, I'm not worried about their talent on defense. I'm worried about what's done with the talent on defense. Their defensive coordinator is somebody that hasn't coached at the collegiate level since he was a graduate assistant at Syracuse since 2003. It's a big gap. It's a really big gap. I'm not saying it's going to be bad, and I don't think it'd be fair to err on the side of bad. It is just a legitimate question mark. Look, at the end of the day, Ohio State hasn't played for a Big Ten championship since 2020. Not won it, hasn't played for one since 2020. Last year with those coordinators and with that talent, they still went 7-2 in the Big Ten with a third-year defensive coordinator and Chip Kelly with that talent. And so I think that's a very big question for me.
You know what the thing is for me, Trev? I think part of that was that team thought they were going to be so good that they didn't have a drive, where there's a lot more players that feel like they have something to prove this year because they weren't part of that. I think that factor, that team just kind of went through the motions at time last year.
Sure.
And I don't know that this team will, because there are so many younger guys stepping up. Like, there's a lot of veterans last year who were just like, dude, we're here to win a championship. And I think they just kind of coasted a little bit.
It's fair.
And especially once they beat Penn State. I think this team, because it's younger, is going to have a lot more just kind of like, hey, I gotta prove myself. I could be wrong on that, but that's partly why I see it. I think everything you're saying is correct. Like, they lost 2 games with that team. What's going to happen with this team? That's a very fair point. And that's why I don't think it's a lock that Ohio State is here. I just think I just got to see somebody knock them off. I got to see somebody beat them this way, because they don't play at Oregon this year. There is no at Oregon on their schedule this year. That's you talk about the 2 losses last year. What's the at Oregon equivalent? I see you nodding your head. We agree. There isn't one. That's the thing that I look at it. Your counter could be, yeah, but they don't have the roster they had last year either, which is very fair, which is why I think this is a tough team to evaluate. I just still think that they're the class of the Big Ten. But I actually felt more confident about this last year than I do this year, which is interesting. So good. Now, who do you have winning?
I actually have Penn State winning the Big Ten. I have Ohio State winning. Where I think it's going to come down to is you have a team that returns a lot of starters that played in this exact same game the year before.
Yeah.
And that will be the biggest stage that Julian Sain and a lot of those guys will be on.
I got the Buckeyes winning it all. So that'll do it for us, Trevor. Why don't you take us out of here?
Listen, guys, hop over to IB Nation Sports Beat. They got their we in, we out. But before you head out of here, be sure to hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, hit that notification bell, share this podcast with your friends and family. And as always, the best way to support what we do here is subscribe to the premium message boards at boards.irishbreakdown.com. Brian and I will be back tomorrow to preview the Big 12 at 1 p.m. But until then, for Brian, I'm Trevor. We'll see you back here very soon on the Irish Breakdown podcast.